Everyone ready? Yes, ma'am. Everybody's on We'll make that happen for you, Chuck.
Oh, just for me.
All right, good morning, everyone, to the Trinity County Board of Supervisors, Tuesday, May 7th. Supervisor Chadwick, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes. Please join us. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So our morning is a little different structure-wise. We will immediately go into closed session as soon as I go through the closed session items. So item 1.1, Government Code Section 54954.5, Conference with Labor Negotiators, County Designated Representatives, David Prentice, Sophia Meyer, and Shelley Nelson, Employee Organizations, Deputy Sheriff Association, Probation Peace Officers Unit, Skilled Trades Unit, Management and Confidential Unit, and General Unit. Item 1.2, Government Code Section 54954.5, Conference with Legal Counsel, Existing Litigation, Number of Cases 1. Trinity Action Association, Inc. versus County of Trinity, Trinity County Superior Court Number 19CV001. Item 1.3, Government Code Section 54954.5C, Conference with Legal Counsel, Initiation of Litigation, Number of Cases 2. And with that, would anyone like to speak to these closed session items before we move into closed session? All right, seeing none, we will move into closed session and be out for 10 o'clock public comment for the regular meeting. Thank you. Our mic's on? Yes. All right.
Hey, can I sit next to you? I always have to protect the press.
Hello. All right. Thank you for waiting while we were in closed session. We only got through item 1.1. Direction was given for that item. The remaining items will be trailed to the end of our agenda today. With that, before we start our presentation, we will move into public comment. This time is for information from the public on matters not appearing on this agenda. All comments are limited to 3 minutes and must pertain to matters within the jurisdiction of this board. When addressing the board, please state your name for the record and address the board as a whole through the chair. No action or discussion will be conducted on matters not listed on the agenda. However, the chair may refer the subject matter to the appropriate department for follow-up or schedule the matter on a subsequent agenda. Good morning.
Good morning. Kate Graves from Lewiston. I want to talk about trees, forests, and fire, just in general. For some reason, people don't think that wilderness will burn, and I'm here to tell you that wilderness burns. I've been on fires in the wilderness. I've had to deal with the lack of equipment. It burns. I used to cruise timber. I did wildlife, fisheries, wilderness, all sorts of things for the Forest Service. And one of the things we did was cruise timber. And there was one place up in by Denny where there was a wind shear event, and it looked like the whole mountainside had the tops of the trees taken off. And we went up and spent time cruising it and finding pieces and putting it all together. And they went to sell it, and an environmental group came up and they stopped it. And one of the people said, if we can stop this, we can stop anything. And they did. And about 8 years later, I think it was the onion fire went through, and there was, we didn't even touch the ground for the whole time we were cruising that. So when that caught on fire, it just went. And it went up into the wilderness, and it burned that too. And so I'm just here to say that if you draw a line around something and call it wilderness, and you think you're going to have pristine forests and these old growth forests that you're going to take your children and grandchildren to, I'm going, they burn. They rot, they die, they burn. And if you can't manage them, that's how nature manages them. They burn them. And you don't get old trees that way. I've been to places where there's huge, beautiful stands of white fir, real old, and lightning struck near it. And they caught on fire, and each one caught the next one on fire. And we had to cut these huge, beautiful trees down because they were burning. And it was gonna kill them all, and the stand was probably reduced by 2/3 when we were done. If you can't manage the forest will manage itself, and the forest manages itself by burning. So if you make it wilderness and we can't take chainsaws and we can't take equipment there, then that's how it'll manage itself. I know you guys have some say in this, and I've brought coordination to the Board of Supervisors before, where you work with the Forest Service and they have to work with you through NEPA. And it doesn't just go to our wilderness, it goes to creating more wilderness in all public lands. And fire prevention is what we need. We don't need fire after the fire happens for people to come in. And there's, Hayfork barely missed it. Trinity Center barely missed it this year. Weaverville's dodged the bullet a couple of times. Lewiston, Hayfork. I mean, one of these days, we're gonna lose a town. Just ask the people in Paradise. Thank you.
Morning, my name is Valerie Dance, and I'm really nervous, so I'm just going to read this, but represent several people in Hayfork regarding this situation. We would like to inform you of the regulations imposed by the California Air Resource Board. CARB has been phasing in a series of regulations for diesel trucks for several years now, requiring newer model year engines statewide to take steps against air pollution. The regulations for all diesel vehicles statewide can be found on their website. We only represent the 2 remaining owner-operator dump trucks in Hayfork. We believe that there is less than 6 trucks countywide that fall into the same category as we do. We feel that with your interest in positive change, growth, and development, as well as cleanup in our small impoverished county, that you would find the following information interesting and of some concern. CARB has previously allowed for a low-use mileage program, allowing operators that have been unable to comply with some of the other regulations, such as purchasing a newer truck. This low mileage program allows for owners to report mileage of 5,000 miles or less. This is somewhat doable considering that in Trinity County dump truck operation is seasonal, but with the widespread as our county is, the 5,000 miles could restrict someone from taking certain jobs. This year, CARB reduced the annual mileage to 1,000 miles, which could amount to only 1 month's work. The hauling of rock, gravel, dirt, and construction debris is necessary for new roads, driveways, culverts, laying rock, or dirt for new construction, development of licensed cannabis grows, and hauling away demolition projects from remodels or old roofing materials, all of which is necessary in any community invested in positive change. Being the owner of a dump truck is very modest living with a lot of overhead expenses. We do not have the means to purchase a newer truck, nor do we think we should have to. We also have no desire to move from this beautiful county where we were raised and raised our families. The kicker now is at the end of this year, our truck and trucks of a couple other owners will not be able to operate. DMV will not re-register these older trucks. At that time, we could take our truck to Oregon and sell it, like we don't share air with Oregon. Only operating about 6 months a year within the county, our negative impact on the air pollution is extremely minimal in comparison to overpopulated, highly polluted areas in Southern California. We have provided this information and hope for greater understanding of our circumstances and the possibility of your support. We don't see the harm in allowing very rural, low-income counties to be exempt from regulations that are putting good, hardworking people out of business. Thank you.
If you wouldn't mind giving your contact information to Tina. I sit on the Air Quality Board and I'll look into this for you.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Supervisor Chadwick.
Thank you. Madam Chair, this is a very important issue in my side of the community. I actually have personal friends that have left the state now because of this, and we only have one gentleman that provides even solid waste removal for anybody who wants it. If it pleases the board, I would request that we would write a formal letter to RCRC. This would affect all the rural counties, and I believe that it's just an oversight that they're not aware of the impact to our communities. Thank you.
Would you like to, I'll give you some information once I contact our other board. And then we can do that, yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else?
I have some documents that I'd like to share. Good morning, board. My name is Tom Marx. I'm from Coffee Creek. I live at 67251 State Highway 3. My wife and I have lived there almost 21 years. I'm here to address a specific procedure and to comment in general on the cannabis licensing process. It appears to me that Trinity County is playing catch-up right now as it relates to the cannabis licensing. These personal notifications that are being sent out seem to be falling through the cracks. As you can see, mine contains very little information. It was typed on April 22nd. A license was issued on April 24th. I'm not even sure how that's possible. These notices, I believe, should contain more specific information for neighbors in the community. Perhaps a statement from the planning department that the applicant has complied with all county ordinances, that all fees have been paid, the site's been inspected, and there are no environmental concerns for that site. This would at least give the community at large a sense that we are also part of this process. Now, in general terms, I would like to remind the board that Prop 64 was passed in Trinity County, but only by a couple of votes, basically a 50-50 split. Even so, a threshold of 530 licenses has been allocated in this county. That is one license for every 26 residents. Or if you count the people that actually voted on Prop 64, that's one license for every 10 people. In my opinion, that's too many, and it's certainly too many licenses to even consider upping that threshold. It seems that once licenses are issued, the first thing that happens, from what I read, is that various modifications are sought to these licenses. It seems like it's the old, give me an inch and I'll take a mile. They want to grow more, I believe encroach more on setbacks, and then ask for enough electricity to power small cities. Also, regarding inspections of these sites, these prior notifications of pending inspections are sent out prior to inspections of these sites. I don't believe that's right. I don't understand what is the purpose of doing an inspection except that to find out if people are complying with ordinances. Giving notice that somebody's coming to inspect your premises seems to me not the right thing to do. Also, we see in the paper code violation, code violation, code violation. I don't know what that is, and I suspect most people don't. I believe this should be public information of what type of code violation, where it occurred, and what, if any, penalty was given for those code violations. I can't find that information anywhere. The Board of Supervisors Resolution 2016-077 resolved to protect the people and places of Trinity County, to ensure our historic quality of life is not disturbed by cannabis cultivation. I believe that we as your constituents put our faith in you to uphold these resolutions that you came up with. As the old saying goes, just because you can doesn't mean you should. I would ask the board and the planning department to please be more vigilant on issuance of new licenses and also on any variances or modification to existing licenses. I would also ask that policies from the planning department should be looked at again, enable them to provide more transparency as it relates to all these cannabis operations, and also to provide much more specific and detailed notifications to neighbors and communities affected by these operations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is it not working? Oh, okay, thank you. Britt, sorry, would you mind meeting the gentleman who just spoke before us, maybe in the hall, and answer any specific questions he may have? Thank you. Okay, anybody else for public comment? Sir Rick Tippett, our Director of Planning and Building, is here, and he's happy to meet you in the hallway for some real specific questions too.
Thank you.
Okay, no one else for public comment? We will move on to presentations. The first presentation is under 2.1. We will receive a presentation from Program Manager Christy Coleman with the Shasta County Housing Authority regarding the Shasta County Housing Choice Voucher Program waitlist. No fiscal impact. Good morning and welcome.
I did provide a PowerPoint presentation as well. So good morning, I'm Christy Coleman. I'm the Program Manager with the Shasta County Housing Authority, and I'm here today with my Director, Laura Birch, formerly Laura Sumner. I'm here today to present some information about the program itself and tell you guys that our waiting list is currently open. So the Shasta, too far. There you go. The Shasta County Housing Authority administers the Housing Choice Voucher Program for the counties of Shasta, Siskiyou, Modoc, and Trinity. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is a low-income rental assistance program, and our program consists of regular Housing Choice Vouchers, Vouchers, which are homeless veteran vouchers, Family Unification Program vouchers, which are referrals through child welfare, Mainstream Vouchers, the Manufactured Home Program, Home Ownership Program, and the Family Self-Sufficiency Program. New this year in 2019 are the Mainstream Vouchers, Manufactured Home Program, Home Ownership Program, and we will be doing project-based vouchers later on this year. A little bit about the Housing Choice Voucher Program, some history for you guys. In 1937, the focus was on public housing authorities to build, own, and manage housing. By the mid-1970s, the public housing stock stood at approximately 1.2 million units. And in the mid-1970s, the push was to turn to channeling housing resources to private owners to build and maintain affordable housing. The push for affordable housing today is known as HUD, Section 8, or the Housing Choice Voucher Program. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is the largest rental subsidy program in the country. There are over 491,000 low-income families in California that receive federal rental assistance. In the country, 90% of households receiving federal rental assistance are elderly or disabled. The Housing Choice Vouchers strengthen communities, families, and children. Property owners in California received over $5.4 billion in 2016 in housing assistance payments. So those are payments that housing authorities pay to landlords on behalf of the tenants. In 2018, in Shasta County, outside the limits of Redding, Siskiyou, Modoc, and Trinity counties, the landlords received over $4.2 million. Housing assistance payments helped the property owners pay property taxes and prevent blight by maintaining their properties in good condition. Vouchers support all types of American communities. The Housing Choice Voucher Program has the potential to help families move to lower poverty neighborhoods and to access higher quality schools. The voucher program has fallen short of this ideal because landlords are not accepting voucher tenants. Living in lower poverty neighborhoods has been shown to raise children's test scores, increase the likelihood of college attendance, and increase household income. Vouchers make housing affordable. They reduce housing instability and help children grow up healthier. Children in homeless families that receive vouchers change schools less often and are 42% less likely to be separated from their families and placed into foster care. Go to the next slide. Thank you. So this slide right here, it does show that the voucher, and the categories didn't come up. So the smaller section shows that households receiving rental assistance, there's 23% in California that are actually receiving the rental assistance, and the other half shows that 77% of the families that need the rental assistance program are not receiving it currently, and this is just in California. So you can see that there is a need for affordable housing throughout the state. So without the voucher program, rent and housing is really kind of unaffordable for families. If a family makes $1,500 a month and rent is $900 a month, it doesn't leave very much left for them to pay for food, clothing, their basic necessities, gas, utilities, all of that stuff. And so without the voucher assistance, families are really finding it a struggle to live. So vouchers expand opportunities for children. This slide shows that families with vouchers reduce their homelessness and housing instability by 4/5, and families with a voucher reduce their homelessness by 3/4. And so it really does help the family become housing stable, which does help strengthen the family and the children. So the Housing Choice Voucher Program is a long-term rental assistance program. Somebody can be on the program for their life. As long as they qualify and they're eligible for the program, they can remain on the program. They must pass the criminal background check, and the income must be at the 50% of the national poverty level. So currently, a family of 3 can make up to $2,304 a month, and a family of 4 can make up to $2,558 a month. And that does go for all the counties we serve. The income guidelines were just changed the end of last month, and so it covers every county that we do serve. Vouchers can be used in Siskiyou, Trinity, Modoc, and Shasta counties outside the city limits of Redding. And when they come on the program, participants pay an average of between 30 and 40% of their income towards their share of rent and their share of utilities, which makes housing affordable. So on our program in our housing authorities, 71 of our participants currently are elderly and or disabled. 28% of our participants are families with 1 or more dependents. Since January 1st, 2017, we have helped over 292 homeless families into the HCV program. This year in 2019, we've helped currently 55 homeless families already as of April 2019. We currently have 921 regular housing choice vouchers, which is made up of 906 regular vouchers, 6 FUP, so the Family Unification Program vouchers through child welfare. And we also have 9 tenant protection vouchers. And those were given to the Housing Authority a couple years ago when a HUD took back a property that was a tax credit property up in Modoc County. We also have 80 Bosch vouchers currently. And last year we applied through a competitive NOFA to get mainstream vouchers, and we were awarded 25 mainstream vouchers at the end of 2018. Currently, our waiting list is open. It was opened April 15th and it will close May 31st. We do still currently have active people on the waiting list that we are working with. Interested people can apply to our housing authority at our office in Redding. We are at 1450 Court Street in Suite 108. Our staff is actually here in Weaverville today at HRN taking applications from 10 to 2. So if anybody is interested, they can go visit our staff there and fill out an application. They can also call our office at 225-5178 and request an application be mailed to them. The applications just have to be postmarked or received to our office by May 31st in order to get put in the Housing Choice Voucher waitlist lottery. We do it by a lottery, so it is fair and equitable for all of the clients that we do serve in every county. And so we do a lottery after we receive all the applications and get them put into our system. The system does a random lottery and puts the people on the waiting list. The Shasta County Housing Authority is currently looking to look at other housing options as well, such as shared housing. And like I said earlier, we will have an RFP out later this year for project-based vouchers. Thank you.
Any questions, board members? Oh, go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, I've seen situations in this county. We have a lot of substandard homes, built in the 40s, and I run into landlords that are afraid to accept vouchers because they'll be, I don't know, the house police will come down and take their homes away. What is the criteria for a house?
So we don't go off of building code, so that's the first thing we try to assure landlords. We go off of a general health and safety inspection. So the house can't be falling over, the roof can't be falling off. There has to be floor covering, running water, hot and cold water. There has to be a stove and refrigerator, working plumbing, working heating. Air conditioning is not required up here, so that's not a requirement, but heat definitely is. And it can be a fireplace. It doesn't have to be an actual heater or central heat AC, anything like that. And so it's a very general health and safety inspection. We just really look to make sure that the house is going to be safe for the client to live in. And they do, even if it does fail and we say, they have some issues that need to be fixed, we give the landlords at least 30 days to correct those issues. And so they have ample time to work to get them corrected. And our inspector is really good about talking to landlords and kind of giving them some suggestions of how to correct an issue if it is a bigger issue. Minimal things that we see is like there's no smoke detector, no carbon monoxide detector. There has to be light covers on the lights, just little things like that, just to make it safe for them to live there.
So what about off-grid housing? We have
With solar,
with solar or generators or whatever, we have
we actually haven't had any of those yet. I would be more than happy to venture in to see how we could get that onto our program. I don't think there would be a reason why we couldn't, because as long as they had, running water, hot and cold water, and all the electricity, was turned on by solar generators, then I don't see why it would be an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so to piggyback
Yeah.
off of Supervisor Gross' questions, if you had a home that you were interested in looking to see if it qualified into the program, how would someone contact you? I mean, what is the procedure, and if you're only opening it up once a year but you have a waiting list, I'm sure you would want to have housing stock coming in.
We do. So we keep an available units list in our office. So anytime we have an interested landlord that's interested in having a voucher client in their home, they can call our office and have their unit put on that list. And that list is given to every person that's actively looking for a unit in our housing authority. And they would call up the landlord, and if they're interested and the landlord wants to work with them, they would fill out what's called a request for tenancy form. It's a green form, and it just kind of gives us some background about the unit. The year it was built, how much they want for rent, the utilities, and it's kind of like an intent to rent. So the landlord and the tenant both sign it, get it into our office, and then we would do an inspection to see if the home qualifies.
What kind of protections do you have for the landlords when you have a tenant who has been destructive? Do you assist in the evictions?
We don't assist in evictions. However, we do work as the landlord's backup as well, in that there's part of the lease agreement in the contract that is signed by the landlord and the tenant and us, is that the tenant cannot destroy the unit. And they have to keep electricity power turned on at all times. And if they're violating those agreements, then they can lose their housing, they can lose their voucher. And so it's a very serious thing for them. They wait all this time, do all this work to get the voucher, and to lose that, it's a serious thing. So we work as your backup too, as well as the tenants, to make sure the landlord's following the regulations too.
Do you know how many approximately vouchers are in Trinity County specifically?
There was over 100 last time I looked. It does vary per day, just kind of depending on when people are moving or leasing up. We have had a lot of new lease up lately, which is great. And with our new programs that we have, we've increased our voucher limit in 2018. And so we're hoping to get more and more clients onto our program. So we're trying to do more outreach to every community that we do serve, so people do know about our program.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Supervisor Dance?
Yes, ma'am. Criminal background checks, do you discriminate then against are you allowed to discriminate if there is a criminal background check, felony
Well, I don't want to call it discrimination.
Okay.
That's a bad word to use. We don't discriminate
It is,
against
that's why I
anybody.
used it.
We're fair housing, we're equal opportunity for everybody. However, our background checks do look to make sure they're not a lifetime sex offender registrant.
Okay.
And we do look back at a period of time to see if they've had any violent or criminal activity charges and if they're on probation, parole, or community supervision for those charges.
And you'd look to CPS, APS for that information?
We do not. We go off of just a general, we do a superior court search to see what we can find. We ask the tenant, are you on probation, parole, or community supervision? They say yes. We get, a history of the charge. We will, go and look at the police report, kind of get the history to see what happened in this charge.
Okay, so you do it on an individual basis?
We do.
And if somebody is coming out of incarceration and they are going through the process, is that somebody you're also willing to help?
Well, it depends on what they were incarcerated
Okay.
for. Violence, if they're going to be on probation or parole, we would probably deny that person.
Okay.
We don't look at like DUIs.
But there still are opportunities
yes,
out
there
there.
are still are opportunities, definitely. And we have another program in Shasta County that they could move to Shasta County for.
Great.
Yes.
With your numbers and your percentages, the thing that I didn't necessarily see are the percentage or numbers for the state overall or for the 4 counties so that I could compare the percentages you gave out to the overall.
Percentages for?
The number of people that are using the part of population. If you say 44% of the population is getting vouchers, is that out of just the people that qualify or are low income, or is it out of the entire?
So if you refer back to, are you referring to this chart right here?
I was referring to a couple of the
Okay.
charts and a couple of the other.
So these numbers on this one in particular, I'll just start with this one, are from the state overall. And so they look at low income based on poverty level. So whoever's in the poverty level for the state, they're saying only 23% of those households are actually
Okay.
receiving the rental assistance.
Perfect, and that's for the state. And
That's for the
that
state.
was the question
Yeah.
for the 4 counties that you service. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
I have one quick question. Given that disasters seem to be part of our life these days, I understand if you are left homeless as a result of a disaster, what is your provision to help them if they qualify to get through that list? Do they get to jump front of the line, or how does that work?
Basically, so if they're a victim of a disaster anywhere within the United States, they can apply to our waiting list even when our waiting list is closed. And they have a special, what we call preference on our waiting list. We have different preferences for where you live, if you're disabled, a family, elderly. And so they get a different preference. They get a higher preference than other people on our waiting list. And so when we had the car fire, the camp fire come through, we did have a lot of people apply to our waiting list, even though it was currently closed. And so we do help those applicants even though our waiting list is closed. The other thing that we will be doing later on this year is for our mainstream vouchers, which are for homeless, at risk of homelessness, institutionalized or transitioning out of institutionalization. We will be putting a preference on our waiting list for mainstream vouchers if they're referred from an eligible organization, and we will identify those eligible organizations at a later time. But basically, if they're working with a social work type of organization in a community that we serve, so in anywhere in our 4 counties, they will be able to be put on our waiting list even if it is closed.
Okay, great. Any other questions? No? Comments? All right. Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you. All right, moving on to our second presentation. Item 2.2, receive a presentation from Dan Voucher with PG&E regarding wildfire safety. No fiscal impact. Yeah. Good morning to us.
Yeah, good morning, Chair Morris, members of the board. We have a presentation here too.
Thank you, Bob.
Great, well, I'm Dan Blair. I'm with the local public affairs team with PG&E. And what we're doing is, based on the devastating wildfires that predominantly happened over the last 2 years, it's become overwhelmingly clear that we have to do more. More has to be done to adapt and address the threats of wildfire. So what I'm going to go over is just an overview of some of the efforts we're doing now and then some of our planned efforts that we have moving forward. Great. So really, the community wildfire safety program that PG&E's developed really has three overarching components to it. And each one of these I'll dive into a little bit more. So if there are questions, there'll be more information that comes through. So first one is real-time monitoring and intelligence. It's really getting as much information in real time as we possibly can. And the second one is new and enhanced safety measures to have our system be as safe as possible. And then the third is system hardening and resiliency, which really is when inevitably there are wildfires. We want our system to be as resilient and be able to handle those wildfires as much as possible. So for real-time monitoring and intelligence, one of the big new initiatives we have is a 24/7 wildfire operations center that we've opened up during fire season. And this is going to monitor potential wildfire threats across our service territory in real time. And we're going to be coordinated with our public safety agencies and local government partners. And this is going to have our meteorologists and other team working in there, monitoring everything from satellite imagery to our wildfire cameras and weather stations to social media from other first responders. Tying into that wildfire operations center is by the year 2022, we have a plan to install over 1,300 new weather stations and about 600 new high definition cameras. And these weather stations are the newest technology that can monitor wind, humidity, as well as temperature. And then the high definition cameras are going to give us the capability to in real time see what's happening out in the harder to reach areas. And the weather stations are going to be shared, and they already are shared publicly on this website here. It's mesawest.utah.edu, and it's a public website that has weather stations from multiple agencies, not just PG&E. And same goes with the cameras. Alertwildfire.org is where anyone can go and look at some of these weather stations and high definition cameras in action. Next slide. So one of the other enhanced safety measures, and this is in our Tier 2, Tier 3 high fire threat areas, is enhanced vegetation management. And we know how important trees are to our customers, the environment, and our communities that we're partners with. And we're committed to working with our customers while prioritizing wildfire safety. So one of the enhanced safety measures is by issue to CPUC, the state, we have to maintain 4 foot of clearance around our electric lines. And that's for, again, Tier 2, Tier 3 areas. So to maintain that, with most species, we have to trim those trees more than 4 feet to accommodate growth throughout the year. So on an annual basis, or depending on the species of the tree, potentially more than that, we'll be going up to 12 feet to get that safe distance, and also getting the 4 foot ground to sky clearance, which is essentially that corridor going straight up and down to avoid that. And this program is growing and developing, and there's also there's interest at the state level of expanding this even more to identifying those trees of species that we know tend to fail, and if they have the likelihood or potential of failing and potentially striking the line, we're going to be looking at those trees as well, working with private property owners, or if they're in public right-of-ways, to work with those agencies and property owners to make the lines as safe as possible. Next slide. We freeze up? Well, the next slide is on our inspections. And so another component that we've added this year, above and beyond our normal cadence of routine inspections that we always do for all of our equipment, we have decided to do a comprehensive inspection of all of our distribution and our transmission lines. And this work is being done through our visual inspections, climbing those towers and poles. We're also using, for the first time in a pretty widespread use, we're using drone technology. And in some cases where the drones don't make sense, we're also using helicopters in the hard-to-reach areas. And really that's an efficiency and a safety enhancement. And for these inspections, we're looking at all components of our distribution and electric and distribution and transmission assets. There we go. We're looking at the cross arms, the insulators, the nuts, the bolts, the signage, the safety measures, all those factors, and really getting a comprehensive look at everything above and beyond our routine work. Okay, the next one. Thank you. So PG&E's made capital investments for our electric transmission and distribution system of about $15 billion over the last 5 years. And we're working to further upgrade and strengthen the electric system in our high fire threat area. And really this is to make our grid as safe and resilient as possible. So this includes stronger, more resilient poles, covered power lines, which are our insulated lines in many cases that can withstand a vegetation strike and potentially what is a spark. And so we're adding about a little over 7,000 lines of this insulated wire through our high fire threat area over the course of the next 10 years. And also looking at potential resilient zones, which are areas that just by the way the grid has developed, maybe it makes sense to add additional back ties, additional localized generation to be able to make areas as safe. And essentially, if there are risks we can eliminate or mitigate, we want to be able to do those. And then also looking at, in certain high fire threat areas on the distribution side, potential distribution undergrounding as well. That's a very large and expensive undertaking, but it's something we're looking at and putting on the table. Absolutely. We got the next one. So one of the other programs that we're implementing, and we've been working with the other utilities in the state. We've also been working with Cal OES and the direction of the California Utility Commission. We are now implementing our public safety power shutoff program, which is a proactive effort to avoid a wildfire from starting. And I just want to reiterate, this is our last tool in the toolbox. This isn't something that PG&E is going to make this decision lightly to do. We realize it has community impacts and economic impacts. And in Trinity County, it's a little different scenario with TPUD serving the majority of the county. So this would predominantly impact potentially the PG&E customers in the southern part of the county. And so essentially what this effort is going to do is a proactive shutoff, and there are a lot of questions and factors in here that we can't answer today as far as how long this will last, when it will happen. Those are all things that are going to be based on the factors. And those factors are going to be a potential red flag warning, low humidity levels, high winds, dry fuel, or what our crews are seeing on the ground. If we see something that we think might be a potentially unsafe situation, that'll factor in as well. So one of the big changes to this year for the PSPS, because we did do a shutdown last year and we had this program, that was the first year that we had the program in place, is that did not include transmission lines. So going forward in 2019 and moving forward, we have both distribution and transmission lines. And the big factor in that is that when we potentially turn off the transmission line, that has cascading effects and can affect communities that are potentially outside of the area of the threat. So we're going to shut down those lines in a high fire threat area if we see the conditions as being unsafe. Given the nature of the grid, depending on the voltage of that line, it could, could affect large portions of the state and the North State. So we're talking to communities and letting them know that it is a potential, and that we want to partner in being prepared and having that plan in place as we develop this plan. So the next slide here, I'll talk a little bit about, so if in the event that PG&E is going to do a public safety power shutoff, our goal is to communicate that to customers within 48 hours. And obviously I'd be talking to the county ahead of that time. You won't hear from your customers, you'll hear that from me. And then flow of communication, we would make sure, we also notify within 24 hours the status of that decision, because it is a weather-based decision, things can change. And then just before the electricity is off. And then once power is restored, we'd also do that communication. In a second, I'll show the website that we do have. We want to make sure people are going on, these are PG&E customers going on, making sure that we have your right contact information and the best way to notify those customers in the event that is going to happen. Okay, next slide. So in the situation of a public safety power shutoff that's implemented, this is the process for us deciding to then turn the power back on. And so obviously we're gonna wait till the weather's all clear. If there's an unsafe weather event, we're not going to start restoring the power while it's still continuing. We're gonna visually inspect every mile of the line that led into us shutting that down. We wanna make sure that everything is safe. If there's any damage, we're gonna isolate it, repair it on site as much as possible, obviously working with the local government agency we're in to make sure that we have all the permitting and everything in line. And then once we've inspected, done any repairs that are necessary, that's when we'll start restoring the power and then energizing the system. And again, that's also some gray area in that as far as how the timing, because depending on what lines got shut down, we have to ramp the system back up, substations get shut down. That can be a bit of a process. So it doesn't just switch back on. So that's the assets that we are affected by the public safety power shutoff are going to be impacting that category right there. And then once we do restore the power, we're going to notify those customers. So if folks have gone out of the area, stayed with family, they're going to know, okay, the power's back. Okay, the next one. So we want to hear the county's feedback, and we really want to get the word out that we want folks to get their information on our website. So we have this pge.com/wildfire safety. That's our website that has a lot of the information I shared today, has a lot more information. It also has where you can go and sign up for the alerts, and we want to emphasize that for our customers, that we want to know how you want to be contacted. And then that email, wildfiresafety@pge.com, and the phone number above it. Those are also public email and phone numbers that any members of the public can ask questions, voice their concerns, and share their input. And we really encourage that. And obviously the board and county staff can contact me directly anytime. That's what I have this morning, so I'd be happy to answer any questions the board might have.
So, are you working with the Forest Service? The Forest Service has a very narrow right-of-way compared to private landowners. Are you trying to get anything done in Washington to widen those right-of-ways through Forest Service lands?
We do communicate with the Forest Service regularly, and we just recently updated our master agreement with them for vegetation management. Widening easements is always a challenge, so that's a conversation we're having with them as far as getting that done. But we do have regular meetings and cadence with them to get that work done.
Okay. And so you stated that you would have to inspect all the lines before you turn the power back on. And of course, having lines in Western Trinity, that could be days before you get out there. So what is the plan for people that may be without power for 4 or 5 days?
Sure.
Elderly people need their air conditioning. Is there some sort of program for them to have generators?
So to answer the first part as far as the timing is one of the things we're planning for is, given that we're going to hopefully have 48 hours notice, we're also going to be able to redirect PG&E resources internally to be able to help with those inspections once we start this. So if we see a potential shutoff happening in the North State, potentially in Trinity County, and we don't see that happening in the Central Valley area, we'll have crews and they'll be here in time for that. So we're trying to avoid the length of that and trying to shorten that as much as possible. As far as the question about what folks are going to do, so we know our medical baseline customers, and we're planning some trainings and exercises in the coming months to be working directly with the counties, Health Human Service Departments, and also TPUD to be able to identify those other customers that might not be checking emails and getting update texts on their cell phones. We realize that's not going to work for everybody. So we're working on identifying those folks that are on medical needs, and working with the county and health and human service departments to make sure there's a plan to take care of them. We're also going to be looking at potentially finding identifying those locations that could be used in a prolonged outage. We don't have a mass generator program that we're going to be rolling out with this, so that's why we're talking early and saying that we need to have, every community is going to have a plan. And if it's potential high winds in multiple communities throughout the North State, there could be a potential many communities are out at the same time. And so we're going to be partners and try to help where we can, but we can't commit to generators everywhere like that. Hopefully there'll be opportunities to get people in a situation where they can be cool, where they can make sure that their oxygen tanks are filled and all those factors. And that's part of that exercise, is working with the local medical and hospitals also to say, okay, what do we have to do in this situation? And also want to stress too that most of Trinity County most likely wouldn't be impacted, given that the WAPA serves most of TPUD. So our indications from WAPA are that they don't have a public safety power shutoff program. So the majority of the county would most likely be on if the portion served by PG&E was not.
So is there anything that this board can do to help you with other government agencies?
Absolutely. Our support is always, supporting with the Forest Service is always welcome, and getting the word out as to what we're doing and why, and that this is a public safety effort, and this is our best foot forward to avoid as many potential wildfires ignitions as possible. That is our goal, is to eliminate that. And with this program, we're willing to make a difficult decision to shut the power off, which we know the impacts of that. But the greater risk is the wildfire strike. So.
And then one last from me. So you mentioned you're working with state agencies, but as far as I can tell, CAL FIRE and other agencies have kind of stepped back and make you in charge of when the power goes off, and that there's not a state oversight that says, okay, we make the call. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's just in the last few months, we've worked with CAL FIRE and Cal OES around the table, so that is happening. And the statewide program, it's actually just got announced in the last few days. It's the Power to Be Prepared. That's a statewide effort, so that the communication is throughout the whole state, and it's not just the utilities driving the conversation by themselves, but it is those state agencies as well, along with all the utilities and the Utility Commission, and having that consistent message of why this is happening. But you're right, the decision is to shut power down on PG&E assets is going to come from PG&E.
Thank you.
Supervisor Taylor?
Yes, thank you. You mentioned CUPC, and so this sounds like it's primarily internal PG&E getting ready. Is there a state and national to-do list, and how do you interact with our local public utilities?
Sure. So along the lines of the statewide effort for the Power to Be Prepared, so that's a coordinated effort, so that the impacts are consistent, everyone knows what's going on, and that conversation is happening at the state level on a regular basis. We're going to be, when we have those exercises, which are really going to be workshop type, talking about all the specific impacts to specific communities, that will absolutely be engaged with local utilities, the county, and other local regional partners, because it is going to be a regional type event. So that'll be PG&E driving those workshops and working with local emergency management, first responders. We also have my colleague here, Mike Weaver. He's we call a public safety specialist, and we have this team on board with PG&E, and Mike's retired CAL FIRE chief, so his expertise is invaluable, and most of his team are retired public safety leadership and safety management, and so their role is to be working with local first responders directly. So in the case of any event, they are the ones on the ground who understand both sides how public safety is going to be responding and what they need real time, and then also the PG&E side, so we can be as coordinated as possible. So those plans in place. We also have some additional resources we're bringing on that are going to be additional fire safety personnel internally to focus on PG&E's assets, but they'll also be working directly with all local fire agencies, and so that's really our focus, is being as integrated and coordinated as possible.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Do you guys plan on mailing any of that info out to your customers?
Absolutely. We actually had a letter ready to go a couple weeks ago, and with so that the development of that statewide program, we put a little pause on it. So we're making sure everyone's on the same page from all the different agencies, and that letter's going to be going out shortly.
Okay. And then also, do you have any plans with your vegetation management on using Roundup?
We do use some herbicides in certain areas. That is, different agencies have different opinions on that, so we can't use it everywhere. But we do use it, and that's always in part of the conversation when we're working with state and federal agencies on their land, as far as what we can and what we can't.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Finley?
On the 7,100 miles of highest fire risk areas, do you have a map that's available to the public of what your highest risk areas are?
We don't. I don't have specifically where those miles are going to be, but what we do have is the CPUC did release publicly the high fire fed area map, so that is available on the CPUC's website.
Okay.
And
then find it on yours.
Yeah, and it's on our. I believe we have that linked on this website here, pg.com, wildfire safety, and that's going to show if you're in Tier 3, Tier 2, or Tier 1, and depending on the state's designation.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and Southern Trinity does have quite a bit of PGE.
We do.
Lives.
Yes. So Supervisor Kennedy, you'll be hearing from me.
And Jeremy has a little bit at the end of his, quite a bit actually.
Yeah.
Wildwood Road.
Yeah.
Wildwood Road does too.
Okay.
So if I'm not mistaken, some recent legislation, of course, moved some of these activities along. All utility companies are now, if I'm not, and please correct me if I'm wrong, mandated to do some of this higher level vegetation management around poles and lines. That would apply to both companies as PG&E and public utilities. Am I not mistaken?
Different, some of the different legislation is going to affect different agencies.
Okay.
So, for the regulated utilities, that's really just the three large ones in California. So PG&E, Southern California Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric. Some of the, there was governor executive order, there's been some other legislation. So there's been a lot of vegetation management related orders and legislation recently. But you're right, we have been impacted by that, and some of that has been in regards to expediting the approval process with state and federal agencies. There was some federal legislation as well. Some of that has been related to us needing to submit a wildfire safety plan. So a lot of this information is part of that, and that was part of the large wildfire safety bill that was passed late in 2018. And so that included submitting annually a wildfire safety plan that included a shutdown component. So a lot of this is being driven by that, but it was also a program that San Diego Gas and Electric had implemented and was successful. And so that was seen as a sort of a benchmark program to implement.
So I'll just refer to all of you as the big three. And if you mentioned earlier that those who receive their power from like WAPA, the mandate to power down prior to a big event is not for the smaller public utility companies throughout the state. I mean, there's more than just TPUD, but do I have that correct?
Yes, and I'm certainly not going to speak for WAPA or
Of
TPUD or any of the utilities, but it's our understanding that the mandate that we have is not related to federal lines.
Okay. And then last question, when you do have to bring power down, do you see any place where that would impact our local utility company in terms of the transmission or distribution lines that are running through this county that indirectly would impact our utility company, our local one?
It certainly could impact the PG&E transmission lines that run through the county as far as inspections and potential repairs. I don't believe that would specifically impact TPOD's customers. I don't know if you have any info on that, Mike?
Yeah, again, Mike Weaver with Wildfire Operations. As Dan stated, we do have 2 series of transmission lines that travel from our Cottonwood substation just south of Reading that go west to the coast. Those 2 transmission lines, specifically the one that goes on Highway 299 west, does feed the Maple Creek sub, which actually supplies utility power back east up to Big Barn along Highway 299. And then the Bridgeville sub, which brings power back to southern Trinity, Dinsmore, Forest Glen. So those could have impacts to definitely the PG&E customers in Trinity County. WAPA, the Western Area Power Administration, is the main transmission feed to Trinity Public Utilities District. So as we saw during the car fire when WAPA lost one of their main transmission lines coming out of Lewiston, that was your source.
Right.
So currently, as Dan stated, WAPA is federally mandated. We work very closely with Brian Adams, who's the superintendent for Southern Oregon, Northern California. We recently met with him in his office, and their office is under no direction currently by Washington to participate in any type of public safety power shutoff. But yes, our transmission lines, which may get shut down in the event of a PSPS, can affect 2 substations in Bridgeville and in Maple Creek.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you both for the great presentation and keeping us updated.
Thank you.
We have one more presentation.
About 6 months, 6 to 9 months ago, brought
I haven't read the item yet, Rich.
I'm all ready to go.
Hold that thought. All right. So we're going to receive a presentation from the Central Federal Lands Project Manager, Wendy Longley. Did I pronounce that right? Yes. Okay. Regarding the Trinity Alps Wilderness Access Routes Improvement Study. No fiscal impact. Okay, Rick, take it away.
Okay, sorry about that. Again, about 6 to 9 months ago, the board had approved a study to look at access roads that are both a combination of county roads and Forest Service roads into the Trinity Alps. We were doing that with the intent of using that as a planning document, mainly for going after future funding actions. And we have done some things, and Wendy Longley has come to give you a report and let you know where we stand right now.
Thank you, Rick. Good morning. My name is Wendy Longley. I'm a project manager for the Central Federal Lands Division of Federal Highways. As Rick said, I'm here today to give you all a background on the study and an update of where we are today and where we're headed in the future. So my staff and I are out here this week conducting a series of public meetings to gather input from the public on the proposed actions and what we've done on the study to date. We conducted our first meeting last night in Trinity Center, and then we have one this evening and then one tomorrow as well. So the main players in this study, Central Federal Lands is taking the lead on the planning study at the request of both Trinity County and the U.S. Forest Service. The Trinity County and the Forest Service are both maintaining agencies along these routes that we're looking at, and they are also local funding partners for the study itself. As we move forward, Central Federal Lands will be completing the engineering study, and then if projects are selected and funding is identified, if those funds are federal funds that we administer, we would be involved in the implementation of those projects as well, developing the design and implementing the construction. This partnership came about based on the history that we have in working with Trinity County and the U.S. Forest Service, and our expertise in working in these types of rural, mountainous environments with environmentally sensitive areas. So as part of the public meetings that we're hosting this week, we're just giving a brief background on the Trinity Alps wilderness. I'll just briefly touch on that here. There's been a focused importance from the Forest Service side on the Trinity Alps. It was recently prioritized as the #7 priority across the country for trail improvements. So certainly a regional significance from the forest perspective. The county recognizes the importance of the area, and the focus really is based on increase in visitation and usage of both the wilderness and the infrastructure accessing the wilderness. So the purpose of the study is really to identify potential improvements on these routes that provide access to the wilderness areas and prioritize those improvements. For the majority of these routes, there's a component that's maintained by the county, and then there's also a component that's maintained by the Forest Service, hence the funding and coordination with both agencies. Really what we're trying to get out of this is, like Rick said, a 15 to 20-year planning document that will allow both of those agencies to define improvements that are needed along each route. As part of that study, we will be putting together cost estimates for that proposed scope of the work. We are gathering public input so that they're poised to apply for any sort of federal, state, or local funding. I'll touch a little bit on what's included in this study. So we came out last fall and did a thorough scoping of 10 separate routes. There were 10 routes that were identified in conjunction with both the Forest Service and the county. And that was based on the usage of the routes, visitation. The Forest Service weighed in on where they're seeing parking issues, where the high usage points are during peak season. From the county perspective, it was where they're seeing continuing maintenance issues, safety issues, and high daily traffic counts. After that scoping visit, or part of that scoping visit was really to gather some engineering data to feed that study. We are putting together a scope of work for each individual route of what we think needs to be done. With that, we are developing pretty detailed cost estimates of what we think that's going to take to implement, and then construction durations of how long that would take to implement. So these are the 10 routes that were identified as critical to be part of this study. Part of what we're looking at this week and gathering from the public is, have we missed any routes that should be up here, and where really are the priorities from a public perception? As part of that initial scoping effort, certainly safety is a first and foremost priority for federal highways as well as the county and the Forest Service. So some of the evaluation factors that we're looking at are the existing safety hazards along the route, in addition to any existing safety features that are out there that are working. We're looking at known and anecdotal crash history. We're looking at the roadway condition itself, posted speed limits, alignments, sharp curves, existing signage, things like that. And then in terms of the improvements that we're looking at, we are really focusing on roadway and shoulder stabilization. There are numerous spots on many of these routes where we're seeing loss of the edge of the shoulder and even loss of some of the lane widths, which is creating a huge safety hazard. That loss of roadway is due to, in some cases, oversteepened slopes. In other cases, it's poor drainage that's causing or exacerbating the erosion. We're looking at, safety improvements that include signage, new pavement markings, inclusion of guardrail where it's needed, and then again, spot or select widening where needed to maintain that existing roadway. From a design perspective, we're looking at how is the road being used? What type of vehicles are using this route? What is the route accessing? Is there horse usage? Are there large vehicles? Is it emergency and fire access? We're looking at the traffic volumes. And then we're collecting field observations from a design perspective, roadway widths, curvatures, things like In coordinating with the county, we've identified that the ideal section for the majority of these routes is a 9-foot travel lane with a 1-foot shoulder. And that's really a good compromise between current design standards and then the context-sensitive piece of the solution. Really, what's the road being used for and who are the users of the road, and to minimize environmental impacts. We did have the discussion on the use of the road in terms of bicyclists, and did determine that there's not a need to accommodate bikes with a separate bike lane or a shoulder. So it would still remain as a shared use. We're considering right-of-way and utility considerations, so along each of these routes, based on the scope of the proposed improvements, we're looking at what easements do the county have, does the county have through those routes. In many cases, the county does have a 40-foot prescriptive easement, but there may be isolated cases if we're widening or doing slope stabilization where we'll be going outside that easement. So how does that impact private property owners or other federal land management agencies? We're also noting where utilities are located and if relocations would be required at those spot locations. From an environmental perspective, we're looking really at a high-level overview of the environmental resources. So some of the main areas that we're looking include biology, so that would be any sensitive species and their habitats. We're looking at wetlands and waters of the U.S. and the state. We're looking at water quality. And then we're looking at cultural resources, so any archaeological or historical resources that are known or have the potential to exist along the route. And then lastly, focusing on any socioeconomic impacts. There are several resorts and permittees along these routes that could be impacted based on the scope of the improvements, primarily in a short-term condition during construction. So we're looking at analyzing what those impacts could potentially be. As we program and select projects to move further into design, we would complete a comprehensive environmental compliance for both the state and federal levels as those projects are identified. From a geotechnical perspective, we're looking at rockfall concern areas and areas where we are losing some of that roadway edge and roadway width as well. So again, we're looking at the improper drainage, erosion issues, and rockfall. Some of the solutions to that may mean some wall construction, some reinforced soil slopes, rockfall, rock scaling, rock bolting, and rock catchment ditches. So based on the scoping and the engineering evaluation that we've completed today, we can summarize the bulk of the improvements into 7 categories. So we're looking at roadway rehabilitation, roadway reconstruction, and roadway reconditioning to reestablish that full bench. We're looking at widening in select locations, slope stabilization, as I talked about, which could mean treatments such as walls and reinforced soil slopes and rockfall mitigation. We're looking at drainage improvements, and then safety improvements such as signage and striping. We're also looking at, primarily on Forest Service land, improving the parking for trailheads. So as part of the public meetings, we are going through each of the 10 routes and talking about the existing condition, the goals that we've established with the 2 partnering agencies for those specific routes. And then we are highlighting what we're proposing for each of the routes. That's a pretty lengthy discussion, and there's a lot of detail in there. I wanted to highlight here for this group 2 routes that seem to be coming to the top, both from the public response that we're getting, but also from the partner agencies. So the first one of those is Canyon Creek Road. That's a 13-mile stretch of road. We're really focusing on this project for safety improvements and then parking improvements at the trailhead at the end of the project. Right now, this route frequently changes from 1 lane out to 2 lanes in several different locations. That brings inherent safety concerns based on user expectations. There's rockfall hazards along the route, and there's serious concerns with the use of the trailhead parking with its poor configuration and lack of parking at the end. So on this route, we are proposing roadway widening in those locations where it necks down to one lane. So that would be for the first stretch of the route up to Grasshopper Flat Road. With this comes quite a bit of slope stabilization at several locations where you're seeing roadway failures right now. Rockfall mitigation, as I had mentioned before, in several locations. Looking at the configuration of that trailhead parking at the end of the route to see if we can improve things there, and then signage and guardrail installation. The other route that we've heard a lot of input on is Coffee Creek. So this is an 18.5-mile stretch of road, and the goals on this one are really to improve access and drivability for passenger vehicles, spot safety improvements, and roadway bench stabilization as well. This one is a 2-lane road, generally varies in width from 12 to 15 feet. There are sections that are chip sealed, but primarily it's aggregate-based road. We are seeing some areas of roadway failures and unstable slopes, and we do see some drainage issues in spots as well. So the proposed improvements for this route include placing new aggregate on 2/3 of the route, doing some roadway conditioning, possibly doing some spot paving in locations where we're seeing bedrock come through to the surface, addressing some of the rockfall issues with some mitigation and stabilization, addressing the drainage issues, adding and improving signage, and then really addressing, there are several, I believe there's up to 14 trailheads accessed by this route, and several of those have no trailhead parking, which is causing some congestion, safety concerns with people parking on the road. So really looking at how we can address those recreational opportunities and trailhead parking. So with that, really, again, the focus of these public meetings is to gain public comment, share the information that we have to date, make sure that we're incorporating everything that needs to be incorporated into this study, and kind of get a pulse on where the public is with this. Moving forward, we will provide both the Forest Service and the county with a final report that they can use then as that 15 to 20-year planning study with cost estimates, construction schedules, and a ranking of priorities. Then it would be on the county and the Forest Service to go forth and apply for federal, state, or local grants or other funding sources to program these projects. We do have surveys that are out electronically. We've mailed over 550 mailers out with project information and surveys as well. So if anyone would like to complete the survey, those responses are due by the end of May so that we can coordinate and compile all that information. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Board members?
There's that light.
Well, I just want to, last night I met Wendy at the meeting, and we went over with all the community, all the very details, people gave her more information than I'm sure she wanted to know about which corner has a rock on it. So I would just encourage anybody when she comes to your area to go there and really get in the weeds with this. And that's all I got. Thank you.
My understanding you have a meeting tonight in Junction City. Is that correct? And tomorrow night here in Weaverville?
I believe it's reversed. I think tonight is here at the library. No, tonight's grand. Okay. Okay, you're right.
Yeah, tonight it's at the Norfolk Range from 6 to 7:30. Tomorrow night it's at the library here from 5 to 6:30. And then a final one in Burnt Ranch at the Burnt Ranch Elementary School from 5:30 to 7.
On Thursday.
It's on the DOT Twitter site to get those times if you need.
I have to join Twitter.
I know. Anybody else have questions, comments on this? No? All right. Thank you for the presentation. I'm sure you'll see many of us at one of your meetings at night. So, thank you so much. Okay, board members, do you need a break or anything? Say that.
Our presentation wasn't in the agenda. Give me a copy of it.
Yeah, and I think everything's falling, our internet's down.
I'm downloading something.
No, this agenda's down, it's not. Well, maybe it is, we can.
Making the rats work too hard.
Boy, don't say things like that. We'll have fun with Yeah.
Anybody need a quick break before we move on to consent?
I do not.
Okay. And we'll move on to consent. So we're gonna take 5 minutes.
You're working, okay.
Does he want my agenda? I have my paper cup.
And we're gonna take a 3-minute break while we work out a technical
You're not
problem.
able to get back.
No, I can't.
And she's using.
The internet.
Yeah, she.
Thank you for your patience while we work out some technical issues. We'll move on to thank you, Jeremy, for that. That download. We'll move on to consent calendar. These items include routine, non-controversial matters that will be acted upon the board by one roll call motion. A member of the board, staff, or public may request an item to be pulled and considered separately. Board members.
I guess I'll pull 3.
3 point what?
3.11.
All right. Any members of the public or staff?
You ready for that?
Yep.
I'd like to pull 3.9.
3.9, okay. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. With that, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Supervisor President?
Yes.
Supervisor Burrows?
Aye.
Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Supervisor Caput? Supervisor Moore?
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to item 3.9, item pulled by member of the public. Appoint Scott Diaz to the Fish and Game Advisory Commission for the position of Recreation Commissioner to serve a 4-year term expiring May 7, 2023, as requested by the commission. No fiscal impact.
Okay, Grace from Lewiston, I'm sure you're going to approve this, but I just wanted to throw in my thank you for Scott Diaz for stepping up and doing this. And also, I'd just like to say I think he's a good choice because not only is he a business person who relies on the river for his business, but he fishes and rafts and he's very familiar with it. And I just want to say I hope I'm sure you guys will approve him, and thank you for Scott for stepping up.
Thank you. All right, any other comments,
No,
questions?
this is CAOs. Nothing, never mind.
All right, I would entertain a motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? So moved. Thank you. Moving on to 3.11, approve a budget adjustment for the Board of Supervisors Department 1100, decreasing salaries and benefits and increasing services and supplies by $10,250. Approve a budget adjustment for the County Administrative Department of Department 1200, decreasing revenues by $93,975 and salaries and benefits by $3,812. Approve a budget adjustment for the Human Resource Department, Department 1250, increasing revenues by $61,026. Approve a budget adjustment for County Council Department, Department 1600, increasing revenues by $228,859, and services and supplies by $200,000. And approve a budget adjustment for Information Technology Department, Department number 1940, increasing revenues by $278. Increase in general fund appropriations of $196,188. Supervisor Burrows, I believe you pulled this item.
I did. I had mixed feelings about pulling it, but this is a lot of money, and I wanted a little more in-depth explanation for the audience. For example, where county council came up with this money. So I just
I can give you an overview, and also Susie is in the audience, and she can get you the in-depth, as it states in the report, that it was under budgeted for 87. We had unanticipated, we weren't able to anticipate what the fees were going to be for one of the lawsuits that we're defending. Prior to, we were averaging, what, Susie, about $3,200 a month, and it jumped to $900. Yeah. So Susie is here, and she's so volunteered. I'll get her to do that portion of it. But most of it is county council for county defense against the lawsuit. It's the internal county council.
So you're asking the revenue part that's coming in the county council? It's coming in from outside internal county departments. So what happens when county council bills us, county council and the general fund picks up the time that they spend that is billable under their retainer, so all of the general council work. Anything outside of that, outside litigation, negotiations, public guardian, that's all billed out to the appropriate departments. And last year when I built our budget for county council, those invoices were averaging approximately $3,200 per month. So that's what I was billing out. So I'm increasing my expenditures and my revenues to offset net zero. This fiscal year, they've actually been coming in at approximately $7,900 per month. So I don't have, so I'm getting excess revenue in because I'm billing county departments for the services that council is providing directly to them. A few years ago, we used to just send those invoices out and bill them directly to those departments, but it wasn't as clear and transparent as what we were spending on county council costs, and it wasn't as easy to grab that information. So we switched it, and everything that we spend on county council funnels through county council's budget, and then is direct billed to the other various county departments that they affect.
And so some of the cost for, say, litigation is going through county council, but is going to other law firms?
No. This is only what we pay to Francis Long Everson, county council. But it is billed out to the various departments
right.
that litigation is stemmed from.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. I would entertain a motion.
Did you ask the
Oh, sorry. Please step forward.
I had a couple of Kate Graves from Lewiston. I had a couple of questions about this too, because it's kind of spread out. And so, as far as what county council is up to right now, and so the county council is Prentice, Long, and Epperson, if I'm correct. It's been stated in court document that, like Kelly Snowden said, he's with Prentice, Long, and Epperson, who's county counsel for Trinity, so I'm assuming it's for the entire law firm. And how is this scrutinized, what they bill? Does anyone ever check to see if their billing is legitimate? I know that for Peeney versus Finley, that Kelly Snowden, and I don't know who else from Prentice, Long, and Epperson has been working on it, and Judge Gwinnett, twice to my knowledge, has asked, why are you here? And he says, I'm here to represent the county. But he's never filed anything, also to my knowledge. You don't just show up and plunk down in front and start chatting with the judge. You have to file court papers and you have to enter into the process. And to my knowledge, that's never been done, yet we're paying him to be there and do whatever he's doing. Has that ever been looked into? And how much money we're paying for that? Because there's also another lawyer there for Supervisor Finley. So we're paying for two law firms at the same hearing. And I would like to know if that's ever looked into or their billing is ever scrutinized, because it's really high and we're paying a lot. And I don't think we should just take their bills and just pay them. They should be scrutinized to see if they're legitimate. And I know that's not what this is per se, but this is paying them and moving the money around to do so. And I'd like to make sure that either if anything ever comes of it, if we're reimbursed if they weren't supposed to be doing what they're doing, and if their bills are scrutinized. Thank you. All right.
We receive detailed invoices from them on a monthly basis, and actually 5.2 is referring to the outside counsel, so there's a difference in billing for both. We have we contract both inside and outside billings.
Quality accounting, there has to be somebody that signs off and checks these. Is that you or is that Susie or who?
It goes through series, but Susie and to the auditor too.
Okay. And so, do you have oversight, or does the auditor do the oversight, or both?
I review them to make sure that they're in line with our contract. As far as reviewing them on whether or not they actually went to court. When
That's
we're
up to the
supposed to
auditor.
be in court that day. That is, yeah, I'm not quite, I don't check that. I don't know how I would check if they were supposed to be in court.
So we'll-
I'm gonna defer to.
Well, I mean, I can tell you that we have ethical obligations surrounding buildings. We can't bill for places we weren't
Right.
present for. So, we have our license obligations are also in play.
The CA would just follow up to make sure that that's what he feels is appropriate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Other than that, any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to accept 3.11 as presented.
All right. Do I have a second?
Second.
Right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so moved. Thank you. Thank you, Susie. Okay, move on to reports and announcements, reports from department heads. Let's see. Oh, I see someone moving up.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Shelley Nelson, HR Director. I just wanted to bring to your attention and remind you that the first week of June, the county will be having their annual loss prevention audit. This is based on Cal OSHA regulations, and it measures random employee understandings of the county's injury and illness prevention program, that we actively train in it, that we are conducting adequate safety training, safety drills, regular inspections, and that we have an effective reporting process in place. I reviewed with Rebecca Cooper, our loss prevention specialist, last week, and we're very confident that we're going to do this again this year. Excited to say that. We're entering the hot months now, so Rebecca's already started providing the heat and illness prevention program trainings to all the departments that are affected by that. And they've reviewed their policies, make sure they're up to date to regulations. And we are preparing for our hearing conservation testings. We do these annually, usually in June. It will be shifted to July if there's a change in doctors with the contracting. And we conduct annual training on that as well. And HR has been working in preparing for the health fair coming in September. It's quite an event to put together for open enrollment, so we are really looking through that. And then I'll be in Chico this Thursday with the second session of an HR Academy to Weaver Cassidy Whitmore, which is HR training for public employees.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. Another presentation?
Yeah, just a quick show and tell. I wish I could blow it up a little more, sorry. But this morning we completed the widening of Pine Pond Road around that slide that we have. And that's really it's based on fractured rock, so it's on much more competent soil than what it was before. And so I have very high certainty that we won't have any problems until we get to building the road. I will never say it will not.
Yeah, don't ever say that. Thank you, Rick, for taking care of that so quickly and dealing with it. Now, since you did this so well, when are you going to work on Forest Road 10?
Well, actually, it's...
Oh, you've heard about Forest Road?
Xenia Lake Mountain.
Oh, this is a different road.
Is Route 10 is Forest Road, this guy's going, so.
Oh.
But right now, yesterday, Central Federal Lands was out there doing a scoping project to scope that. You know, they'll be designing it over the summer, and we're not sure if we're going to have construction funds this year or next year, but it is on the top of a lot of lists to get something going on it. So at least we're stabilized. We can raise the limit on the weight limits so the vehicles can get back in there. And
Yay, propane tanks.
we felt okay with the school bus also.
So you and CA will be able to make another presentation? God, I see those heads going that now. Okay, huh?
Yeah.
You know what? Rick did go to the pie auction. Thank you, Rick. You did.
It was good pie.
You see, I can take you out beyond belief.
No kidding.
I can just.
All right.
No, that was a lot of fun. What we'll do is I'll have a better, more detailed report from Central Federal Lands here soon, and when I have that done, I'll
Okay, thank you.
Rick, I've got a request from some people on Sky Ranch Road to have a discussion with you about what's happening on the road there. So I'll try to set up some time with you to.
Yeah, it's, of course, we have the combination of TRP and the damage from the 2019 storms that are dealing with over there, so we're kind of in competition.
So,
Who's going to get there first?
Sorry to step on Jeremy's district, but this is through.
We're a team, it's okay.
This is through TRRP complaints, so.
Did you hear the three of us go, what?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other department head? All right, moving on to County Administrative Officer.
I guess it's good news. We're going to ask the board to attend on our June 6th meeting to start the meeting out at the site for the jail. We're going to do a groundbreaking. June 4th. I'm sorry, June 4th.
Okay.
So the wrong yeah. So on June 4th, we'd like to invite the board out first thing in the morning to do our ceremonial groundbreaking for the jail.
Great.
Do we bring a shovel or anything?
We should have, we have shovels. Where to go?
Trowels. We're looking trowels.
Trowels.
Golden shovels.
And
I got one. Blue.
That's all I have to report.
All right, thank you. County Council, nothing. All right. Members of the Board of Supervisors. Supervisor Chadwick. Or I can start in another.
No, if I just give me a second there. I remembered to bring my notes this time. So on 4/20, we had an event at the fairgrounds. Supervisor Voucher is going to be speaking about that. On 4/24, the Community Action Partnership, Glen Clusa, Trinity County, and Orland. We honored the founders, Mr. Carmona and Kim Gahagan, and Dr. Coons and Veronica Albies joined us there. We have now successfully finished the application and approval of the nonprofit, so the CAP board has a second leg, if you would. So the grants that can come to us that we could not accept because we were not a nonprofit, we can now. There was a COC that followed up on that. Glen Clusa and Trinity had been looking at being absorbed into Shasta, which would have added 3 more to their 10. At this time, we are not doing that. And so we also walked through the Nova Center there in Orland, and it's a building that was a former strip mall that had been vacant since it was built, and the county, along with private funding, has turned it into an incredible place for the county as well as the community. They have a recording studio there that you can rent, fully equipped. It has computer labs, it has extensive child care facility, and they teach their paramedics. So it's a private as well as public grant, and a lot of ideas floating around that. 4:30 to 5:3, RCRC in Death Valley. And then on May 4th, we had an event, Top of the Grade. It is off of 299. It's the first community within my district that we started a conversation about 2 years ago. And CAL FIRE, it's Wildfire Preparedness Month, as you may already all know. Did an assessment up there about a month ago, and so we had a community barbecue, and we invited the community to participate with CAL FIRE. There's approximately 7 loads of gravel that has been donated by the community. They raised about $2,000 more. They're going to have turnabouts where CAL FIRE believe they need it in clearing. And if you go on the CAL FIRE website, you'll see a document that you can download. I think I printed it out. It's several of them. And are you ready? What to do ahead of time, how to get prepared to go. It's all free, and they have where you can put your zip code in, and then you'll get an alert on your phone. So as you heard this morning, there's more and more collective, more cooperation within the different government and non-government entities. And so Fire Safe Council meets regularly in Trinity County, and that's a good place to start to bring your community together, because it is community by community. Your government can't take care of you as well as you can take care of yourself. So please get together with your neighbors, talk to your board of supervisors, and do a similar event. They want to do it annually. This was our second one, and it was really wonderful.
Great. Supervisor Burns?
Yeah, no out-of-county travel, but we did have a TRRP meeting yesterday involved with the refinements document that you may or may not have read about. So that process to see if we can make TRRP a better, more functioning collaborative group is in the process. Will probably take a year or so to see if we can pull that off.
Okay.
April 25th, out-of-county travel down to Anderson for Nortec.
All right. Supervisor Brown?
All right, it's been a while, so I've got a little bit. April 11th, I attended an intergenerational leadership class hosted by CSAC in Reading. I learned that I'm a Gen Y / millennial. I will do my best. Some of our traits that we are committed to ideas and causes, not companies. Diversity integration, and in a few years, 50% of the workforce will be millennials. Watch out. On April 12th, and this was not paid for by the county, I was invited to go to Harvard University and attended the Reimagining Happiness for a Better World conference. Super cool. It's put on in conjunction with the Bhutanese government, and they were the first government to adopt a gross national happiness index. And the government now uses that instead of GDP when making their decisions for government investments. Anyone who wants to talk with me about that, I'd be thrilled, but I don't want to waste everyone's time. So after that, I was able to go to Democracy Now! In New York and go out to dinner with Amy Goodman, and that was awesome. The 20th was at Hayfork at the fairgrounds We had our retail cannabis scoping meeting. Dr. Tammy gave us lots of information. John Brower, Adrian, Leslie, they all had good things to share. I don't feel like we got as much community feedback as we were hoping for, but it was a good start. And we'll be having our next one at the Vets Hall here in Weaverville on the 15th from 4 until 8 o'clock. And I believe we'll get a lot more public feedback at that one. On the 20th, I was in Wairika for my first NCRP meeting with Judy, and I'll let her report on that. On the 30th to the 2nd, I attended the RCRC in Death Valley, and that is such a cool place. I had no idea. RCRC, we discussed some of the bills, such as Assembly Bill 1049, supporting tax exemption for fire equipment purchases for for volunteer fire departments. SB 45, $4.3 billion for natural resource investments. RCRC is participating in discussions with the CPUC on how to handle investor-owned utility companies and the fire dangers. There's the discussion of a formation for a rural economic natural resource investment extension of RCRC. That was pretty cool. And AB 1356, which requires counties that passed Proposition 64 to allow for retail activity. So those are all things that RCRC is in support of. Going down the line there in Sacramento. And I believe that's it.
Right, yeah, not a lot.
Goodbye.
Okay. It's CAO, something a couple of board members mentioned just kind of reminded me, could you check into when we will be, speaking of fires and disasters, when we will have the presentation on the iPod system? It's in another alert system that I know our local OES director has been working on it. He was here. So I just don't want to do it in July. I'd like to do it before things start. Hopefully we'll have a non-eventful summer, but anyway. As we have mentioned over the many couple of weeks, I think it's now 8, we've worked with, helped facilitate a discussion on Caltrans, Supervisor Brown and I, with members of the public who've concerned about this notice unexpectedly about Caltrans wanting to spray, as all of you recall our meetings, as well as members of SAFE. Given the time frame the announcement was made and time of year, Caltrans has decided they won't be spraying this year. They will work to look at other alternative measures and continue their activity, whether it's mowing in these areas. They will still look, knowing the press that Roundup is getting also probably is playing a part into some of their decision, and to find some other alternative measures if mowing won't work. So for now, for this summer season, we won't see any spraying from Caltrans. Moving on to, I was out of town for CSAC, where of course, it's a month earlier than our normal Ledge conference. I think this is going to be our normal meeting time of late April. Budget is still being developed with the May revise around the corner. Of course, homelessness, disaster preparedness, and of course, recycling is hit all counties in a large way. So there are some bills moving forward on recycling. We'll know more as time moves on. As Supervisor Brown mentioned, we held our NCRP meeting, North Coast Resource Partnership, this time in Wairika. This was a big meeting for us where we, the whole membership was able to award out of $11 million from Prop 1 to a variety of projects throughout the region. This is one of our big points of our work that we do. Lucky for Trinity was awarded $2.1 million to the various applicants that applied for some of this funding. Roughly, these are rough numbers, but about $1 million is going to the Lewiston Water Distribution Center system, I should say. Roughly $800,000 is going to the Watershed Training Center for their phase 2 of the South Fork Salmon Restoration Program. And roughly $600,000 is going to the Weaverville Sanitation project that they're trying to enhance, improve some of their system for their sanitation work. We also accepted $4 million that myself and executive committee have worked with the state to, it was courtesy of the California Natural Resource Agency, to look at how to do some forest and fire prevention projects throughout the region that we represent. An ad hoc was formed to advise on the implication and implementation, I should say, of that money. And I think that's all in terms of money. Another phase 2 of Prop 1, we will accept applications for probably next spring. And then lastly, I'm honored to say that I was reelected as chair of the committee along with my vice chair, Lee Hillman from the Karuk tribe. So it was a very, very busy day, and some really great projects throughout the region were funded. And other than that, that was a very busy 10 days, I think. So, thank you. Okay. Moving on to our ad hoc reports. I think anything else on the Board of Supervisors? No.
No, we reported on the collaborative.
I'm going to hit that on your ad hoc. So the commercial cannabis ordinance amendments, same status quo?
Yep.
Until we go to the amendment portion of that work. Federal lands legislation. Following up on your question just now, Supervisor Groves. Probably the paper was there, thank you. The group, Supervisor Brown was also in attendance. The group could not come to an agreement to have the question, if I'm saying this right. There were a lot of motions going around, emotions too, but motions to lift the public lands legislation up to a vote. We do have a high standard or a high requirement for a vote to pass of, I believe, 80%. Did not make a vote of any nature. I will say there were some requests that Congressman Huffman's Representative John Driscoll was going to take back. The group asked that grazing and mining licenses be allowed. If you recall in the legislation, it said no new mining or grazing would be allowed. The group did ask for that to be lifted. And also there was some language in there where there was language that said prioritizing projects in this proposed area. The group wanted that lifted as well. They didn't want, for some reason it seemed counterintuitive, but they didn't want to have that just be the only place where priority projects would be allowed or funded. They felt that was limiting. So those are at least 3 key points that were set back with John to look at. I think this is still going to be a long process. I don't think we're going to have an answer right away, although I'm going to try to get one by next meeting on those 3 points. I don't think we're going to have immediate pass or fail on the legislation anytime soon, but I could be wrong. So that's the report out on the collaborative. Supervisor Brown, anything you'd like to add that I might have forgot?
I think the paper was very thorough.
Okay, that's what I thought too. So I don't know what.
Supervisor Brown and I have not had a chance to meet. We plan to meet this afternoon.
All right.
And
we'll go from there.
And we'll have a report on what we suggest as the next steps forward. So will it be dissolved or have ideas to move forward?
Okay, sounds good. All right, retail cannabis ordinance.
Since the last scoping meeting, there hasn't been much discussion. We have, like I said, we have our other scoping meeting on the 15th. I believe, I don't know if we had a meeting before or after that. I'll have to look at my calendar again. But no new news to report.
Your scoping meeting is in Weaverville on the 15th in this room?
The Veterans Memorial.
Okay, and what time?
4 to 8.
4 to 8, did you just say that?
No.
Okay.
A few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
There is some YouTubes. The video was taken and it's in 4 parts. And everybody on the team should have it. So if you can't find it, you could probably get a hold of Jeremy or hopefully everybody has it to share. But I think if you put YouTube 420 Fairgrounds, hopefully it'll come up.
Okay.
So anybody, it's open to anybody to see.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to county matters. So, my thought is we could get through these 3 items of county matters and break for lunch and then come back to the agenda items and move back into closed session. Does that work? Okay.
And you'll report on those sessions, there's a conflict between 2 and 34.
Okay, so we'll navigate that to accommodate them as well. All right, so just to repeat, we will go through these standard 5.1, 5.2, 5.3 items. We will break for lunch and then come back for those additional items that were added to the agenda and move back into closed session upon returning for lunch. Item 5.1, approve a budget adjustment for the contributions to other fund departments, Department 1990, increasing transfers out by $30,800. Approve a budget adjustment for the contingency general fund department of 9901. Decreasing appropriations for contingency by $30,800 and approve a budget adjustment for Trinity Hospital Department at 9100, Department 9100. Increasing transfers in and increasing revenue by $30,800. Increase in general fund appropriations in the amount of $30,800. Current balance in the contingency fund is $134,837.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Welcome, Mike.
This is due to increases in interest rates, which helps us in a lot of other places, but the hospital fund does not, because the deficit, it gets charged interest. So this is to enable us to transfer those funds to general fund hospitals.
Okay. Any questions from the board? What I couldn't find, what is our balance on that interest that's hanging out there?
Balance on
the
what the
hospital.
deficit is?
Yeah.
Still around $4 million. I didn't get the exact numbers.
Okay, that's what I was kind of remembering.
It's been staying pretty steady.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions for Mike on this item? Members of the public? No? All right, seeing none, I will.
Move to approve 5.1 as presented.
You want a second? You got a second.
All right.
Done with seconds.
Everyone, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so moved. That was quick. Thank you, Mike. Item 5.2, approve a budget adjustment for the Board of Supervisors, Department 1100, increasing services and supplies by $45,000, improve a budget adjustment for the contingency general fund department of 9901, decreasing appropriation for contingency by $45,000, increase in general fund appropriations in the amount of $45,000. Current balance in contingency general fund is $104,037. Okay, this is your item.
Madam Chair, I need to recuse.
All right.
I'll do an alternate. Susie so she can give you the details of it. This is the other side of the. The other side of the outside council.
Susie,
Yeah, so as Richard just mentioned, this is to pay for the legal counsel, outside legal counsel that is not Prentice Long Epperson. Currently, we have 2 lawsuits that we're paying for outside counsel, that we're not being represented. We're paying for outside counsel and we're not being represented by Prentice Long Epperson, and that's the Penny versus Finley case where we are paying for, Epperson to represent the county, which comes out of county council's budget, as we talked about in item 3.1. And then we're paying for Churchill White to represent Supervisor Finley, which comes out of the board's budget. Then we are also paying for the TAA litigation costs, where we contracted with Cole and Cooper, for Derek to represent us on that litigation, which also comes out of the board's budget. And then that one, because it's cannabis related, will be direct billed back to cannabis and then reimbursed from the board budget. But we originally budgeted, estimated $50,000 to cover that cost, and it's not going to be sufficient to get us through the fiscal year. So I'm anticipating that an additional 45 will cover that and hopefully get us through this fiscal year.
all right.
I hope to not be before you asking for additional contingency funds for this case anymore. I don't know if you want the total lawsuit costs to date, I can give those to you.
Sure.
I know. So, for the TAA lawsuit, from its initial filing, from its initial filing through the end of March, we've spent just under $10,000 on that one. And for the Penny versus Finley lawsuit, from its initial filing through March 31st of 2019, we've spent just under $278,000 of general fund discretionary dollars. So both of those, the Penny Finley lawsuit is 100% funded by the discretionary general fund dollars. And as I stated, the TAA lawsuit will be billed to cannabis.
Okay, thank you. Members of the board, questions for Susie or Richard? No? Okay, members of the public, questions?
Kate Graves from Lewiston. This is one of those items that you guys, I don't know why, well, I do know why. It's kind of hidden what it is, unless you already know to look and look at the backup and the backup in the backup. You don't know what this is going to. The money for this, I've been going to these court cases, and the waste of money that I see here is it's hugely disturbing. We're paying for 2 separate law firms, and like I said before, I believe Prentice Long and Epperson shouldn't be involved in this at all. It also, in your backup that I've read, sometimes you have inaccurate information. I've seen that it was requested that this lawsuit continue. It was supposed to be heard in November. There was 2 weeks set aside. On the second day, they were surprised when they were told there was 2 days. That was not Forenza Peeny's request. That was your court clerk, but in your backup, you say it was at the request of Forenza Peeny. So this would have been done way back in November if they had their druthers. So not only is this being dragged out and really expensive, it's being dragged out for the people that, the election contest, which should have been heard in 20 days, 3 years ago, almost. So I don't know how you guys can expedite this because of a whatever by the court clerk again. It still has to go back to the judge, and we'll be having another hearing on this because information wasn't passed along as it should be by the court clerk, which I realize isn't under your purview. But a lot of this it's not the fault of the plaintiff, contestant, I guess you would call them. And it's really being dragged out, and this is obscene, the amount of money we're paying for this. We're not even sure, it was asked by one of the supervisors to confirm that it was okay for you, the board, to pay for Supervisor Finley's law firm, and that was never done. Yeah, she asked, and it was said it was asked and answered, but it never was. But then Margaret Long did answer. But it's still never been confirmed with an outside attorney general opinion to counteract the one that we've already given you to show that it's not legal to pay these funds. So basically, we're paying several $100,000 to a law firm that shouldn't be there, and another law firm that it's not legal for us to pay. And I hope eventually we get our money back. Thank you.
Anybody else from members of the public, board members? All right. With that, I will bring it back to the board to approve or not.
We'll move to approve 5.2 as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, thank you. Vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, so carried. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Richard. All right, item 5.3, increase the allocation of for the Department of Transportation Transit Division from 4 to 4 1/2, 4.5. Transit drivers effective May 7th. Effective May 7th, do you mean 2019 or 2017?
2019, I was going to have highlighted too much.
Okay, so we'll make sure it says 2019. Approximate cost and salary and benefits per month for half-time transit driver at A-Step is $1,838.56.
Proved that a few times and still missed it, so my apologies for that. So the transit division, currently their allocations are they have one full-time coordinator, they have 3 full-time drivers and 2 half-time drivers. And they're all working their shifts that are assigned. When drivers are taking leave of various types, it does impact that small department quite a bit. The transit coordinator, who should be doing a lot of coordinating work, ends up driving a lot of the routes. So what the department is asking is if they could add an extra half FTE, full-time equivalent employee allocation, so that this part-time position could just be on as called, as needed for these vacancies as they have them. They do have the budget, and I understand.
All right, good. That's important. Any questions from the board? Members of the public? All right, I'll bring it back to the board.
I'll move to accept 5.3 as presented.
Say that again.
And with the correction on the agenda of May 7th, 2019.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you both. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, so moved. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you. All right.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
The sheriff has left. I don't know if he's just outside, but I was thinking to start their day, we could do addendum C.
I'll check and see if he's handy.
The sheriff will be coming back. They're starting a new, they're testing out their new radio system. So he would like to be there for that. And he was planning on coming back.
What representative from Sheriff's Department?
Okay.
Just so they can get on with their day, if that's, you don't believe the sheriff wants to be here for that?
You're okay, Jill?
No, yeah, I'm fine.
Okay.
Tell him not to come back.
All right, so I just lost my agenda. Bear with me. Okay.
He's not here.
All right, we will cover and get C done. Thank you, Supervisor Burrows. I forgot that was on there. We will move to have Jill come and tackle this item with us. We'll approve amendment number 2 to the agreement with Motorola Solutions, Inc., modifying the modules, data conversion, and equipment purchased to provide, install, and test the following systems: the Spillman computer-aided dispatch, CalWorks 911, jail management system, records management system, and Motorola APX two-way radios. No fiscal impact. Okay.
So this addendum is after the beginning of the year, when the administration changed over, we relooked at the contract. Kind of just went through what we needed, what we didn't need, things that maybe were extras that we really didn't need, and then some things that had been overlooked that we did need. And so we traded in 3 of the modules that we had originally selected, chose a few extra things, and still have about $30,000 left in credit. And we'd like to save that to apply to purchase radios in the near future.
Great. Questions, board members? No, it's pretty self-explanatory. Members of the public? All right, see then, we'll bring it back to the board.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, so moved. Thank you, Jill. All right, with that, we will return after lunch for our remaining 2 items and also our closed session. So if we came back at 1:30? That one?
We have to pick as an issue from 2 to 2:30.
I would go to the side. I take some jars and I take it out. Cinco de Mayo.
Because I don't want to see other closed session.
I got stuck now.
One other one.
Yeah.
So if we're ahead, we'll just have to wait.
Everybody was rubbing on each other. Amanda hired.
He's busy.
He's busy, and especially after they were gone. Oh my God. Oh my God. I can do
So
it.
if we come back at 1:30.
One lady was saying, her husband's been in bed for 2 weeks. Because he can't, yeah, it's really, really bad because
I see.
just, he can't move. And he said, all of a sudden, she said,
So quick heads up on timing. When we come back from lunch at 1:30, we have to move right to closed session. So I would, without short of having a crystal ball, let me see about this. I would say we could start the other items by around 2:30. And if we have to wait for all of you to return, we will. So don't rush back until 2:30. And we'll tackle those other items, but we will have to move right back into closed session. Hi, Joe, welcome. We're back at closed session. On the last 2 items, we went in, a direction was given to staff on both closed session items. All right, moving forward for addendum A, we're going to introduce and waive the reading of and enact an urgency ordinance imposing a temporary moratorium on the cultivation of industrial hemp within the incorporated areas of Trinity County. No fiscal impact. And Joe, will you join us and you can walk us through? I know board members have had inquiries, what's going on with industrial hemp. I understand that regs just came out. We don't have any, so this is kind of a stopgap measure. So, Amanda, do you want to just, for everyone's purpose and new board member, walk through the timeline on this urgency ordinance, how these work on the moratorium angle?
So for this type of urgency ordinance, if you voted to approve this, it would become effective immediately, but only for a period of 45 days. 10 days before the expiration of the ordinance, it can be brought back before the board for an extension. I believe it's up to 22 months, and 15 days is the extension maximum for an animal ordinance of this type.
Okay.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I take that back, 10 months and 15 days.
Right. And now, if passed today, then that would give staff that time to work on it. Or they could get it done in 4 months, whatever time it took.
Right, it would just have to come back before the board again, before this vote to extend the time.
Right. Okay. Yep, go ahead.
But after the 10 months, 15 days, it can go up for another 12 months.
Correct. Right,
That's
right.
the total of 22.
Right.
Thank you. So,
No more than 2 extensions.
right.
So.
So with that, I think, Joe, you have some thoughts on this temporary moratorium on industrial hemp while you figure out some regulations around it. Is that my understanding?
Yeah, and if you find a crystal ball you couldn't find, I could use it. Well, there's no protest signs or pitchforks or any of that, so that was, first thing's good. Good afternoon, thank you. This will be a first one for me for the board, so just for the record, Chadwick Groves, Morris, Fenley, and Brown. Sounds like a law firm. Welcome, good afternoon.
It does.
Let's start this off. I agree with the urgency portions of it without something. Right now, anyone could grow hemp. Anyone, someone could grow it because it was in the Farm Bill and became federally legal. It's legal. So it's definitely in this county, I believe, I think it was item, where does it say? It's incompatible. I fully believe in that. Without some sort of protections against pollen drift. So yes, I believe in the urgency that knocks out this growing season, and thank you for the timeline. The items 1 through, I forget how far they go on, that sort of says how we got to this point. At first when I was looking at it, why do we want all this in the ordinance? And I realized this is a new thing, so maybe it is good to memorialize it in the ordinance form, so some future historian can say, why did they do this? Oh, well, read all this here and it'll tell you why they did it. And please bear with us, some of the things that we are in this ordinance, because come Friday due date when we were writing it, things we believed to be true that morning turned out not to be true. So I will point particularly to, where was it? Item 6, where it states the Industrial Hemp Board is expected to make its recommendation to the Secretary of the California Department of Agriculture for regulatory framework, allowing the cultivation of industrial hemp for commercial purposes in approximately late 2018, but have failed to do so as of this date. That changed. I got an email Friday morning. There is a package. If people need it, they can get it from us. April 30th is when they did it. I found out Friday morning that that package has been done, and basically it's the registration, how to register if you want to be a hemp producer. So this is very timely. I had some issues with some of the first part that made some statements that experimental farms are completely unregulated. That's really not true. We do have experimental use permit conditions for experimental use on experimental farms. So I was responsible for removing that language. I can live with all the rest of it, but this boils down to, for industrial hemp to be legal, it's got to be 0.3%, which is 0.003%, an incredibly low tolerance for THC. Obviously, we live in a county where people have spent a long time coming up with high THC cannabis plants, and the pollen drift could affect both the cannabis producer and the hemp producer. And so, yes, they are incompatible. We need this ordinance to be passed so we can start working on, is there room for both? Is there room for a research institution? There's a whole bunch of questions that we currently don't have answers for, and it will give us the time to start finding those answers. And look for me to start a series of grower meetings, possibly as early as next week, so we can get growers in the room and have a format for a discussion of just does hemp fit at all in Trinity County? Research station, limited production, seed breeding, whatever, all of which I don't really have answers to right now, but we need to start going down the road. And gee, I'm not doing a terrible job of, we're waiving the reading, you read it in the print, right? Please don't take issue with the stuff that we already know not to be true. It was, the ground is shifting beneath us as we walk. I believe cannabis is told that they're flying the plane while they build it, so I told the hemp folks that you're building the ship while you sail it. But the difference is with the ship, it starts going down, you still jump overboard, where that plane, that's really ugly when it hits the water. Is there anyone in the room with questions?
Oh, wait.
No, not yet?
Hey, hold tight, hold it. What we'll do is see if the board has any questions.
I do have one. Do we have any hemp growers at this time in the county that you're aware of?
I am aware of hemp grower who, there's many people who have expressed interest. I know of one that actually successfully produced a breeding, and now it's over. They got a seed crop actually in the winter, back when there were no regulations, and that needs to be pointed out. Right now, we have no regulations, and this is to start the process to, at first, have a temporary ban on hemp. And so, yes, there is a very, very small amount. There's nobody I know that's proposing an open growing of hemp in a field or anything like that.
Okay.
But seed breeding is of a big interest in not just Trinity, Humboldt, Trinity, Mendocino, and other counties. And the law is going to be in the future that to get hemp seed, it should be produced in California, which is putting pressure on, there's some economic incentive to become one of those people. And right now, without a whole real good roadmap, people are moving independently, I guess you should say.
Any other questions from the board? Yep. Thank you, John.
Where'd you get this ordinance? Anybody in the room know?
I didn't wrote it start to finish. No, I had my cut at it from the Margaret Long emailed it to me, and she had my wrong email, so that took a while.
So it's hopefully if county council can maybe say it came from MoDOT.
I actually
No,
can't.
I'm not. MoDOT's been working on this for at least 6 months.
And I honestly don't know.
I don't either. That would not surprise me.
If county councils move forward, if I understand it, then
I know.
it's a bigger ordinance than a bigger urgency ordinance than I would like to deal with, but I would rather just no grow, that's it, for the time this goes into effect. So, who will work on the ordinance to put this through?
I guess the fingers all point in the room with me, so
Right.
I lost out on spin the bottle. So yeah, it's the ag department.
So
It should be.
you have access to the rest of the ag commissioners in the state and the
Absolutely.
state.
Yes.
And there's probably people that have already put something together.
And I talk to them pretty much on a daily basis.
Because I just want to let this board know I will not move forward with extending this for the next years, as we've did with the last emergency ordinance for cannabis. I just want this in place and done as quickly as you can. So you've got the first. I can work with this if you have the first length of urgency ordinance in place.
I'm not sure if I understand your question, John.
I'm not going to go through what we went through with cannabis again, extending the ordinances.
Well, he has. He'll bring it back in 45 days.
And we have, you'll bring it back in 45 days.
And then it'll get renewed for a little more time if you.
No, you will bring back the ordinance for us to approve.
That's
I
a
think
tall
that's
cut to get
tough.
all finished because with so many unanswered
Yeah.
questions. I mean, we could
That's
get the
unrealistic,
first, we could get the
actually.
first break, of course.
Right.
Let me think, 45 days is where that's gonna be.
I agree that there's no hemp this season, but we can drag this out for 2 or 3 more
Oh,
years.
sure.
And you know what, if you want to, we might as well put together an ad hoc committee and put Supervisors Groves and Morris on it and move forward with that. I don't care what the board does, but I'm not going to.
He still has
let
to
this
work
go.
with planning through the land use
I
plans
understand,
as well, so
and
that's
he-
gonna take
he
more
has
than
to work with
45
that.
days.
I
So,
understand that.
I
I'm
think you need to
expressing
get
my
your-
pissed offness right now, so bear with me. Or don't, tell me to leave.
Well, I'm trying to follow you, John, and it's a little difficult.
Express your feelings. I'm gonna face it
Yeah.
from other people anyway.
I know.
It's part of the job.
Supervisor Groves, I think you had your letter.
No, I don't know, I'm just sitting here minding my own business and get attacked by a supervisor down there, but, when I first asked, I was gonna ask point blank, he expects this to be done in 45 days. I don't see that's a possibility, but, with that, our silliness up here, let's get back to real business. Is there good data of the work between the hemp and cannabis? I mean, is there a lot of research been done, or are you going to have to go out on the ground and try to figure this out?
We have to fit it into California's regs, because there's other nations, Canada, there's other, Denmark, there's other places where they do things, but they have different laws and rules than us. I do have to approach this from a perspective of, this is a cannabis producing county. I mean, I got 2 crops. I got timber, I've got cannabis, and some wine. So it's a very important crop for the county. As an ag commissioner, yeah, just the thing of making a crop illegal, we take that very serious and not cavalier, and I've been racking my brains about this, and is there room for both really is the question, right? Can we have both? Is there a way to do it? Well, pollen is the problem, so not without some sort of county regulation on how we will, on the producer's end, prove that they can control their pollen is the issue, and I would ask the audience if I'm missing something other than pollen. Pollen seems to be the major. So it goes like this. You can get feminized seed. That's great. Feminized seed has higher incidences of what they call Hermes, putting out male flowers. If you grew a great big field of hemp with feminized seed and no one policed the little bit of male flowers, you still have a pollen problem. The breeders themselves have pollen problems. How do you say you work on a particular strain? How do you keep your other growers' pollen from infecting? Well, it's one level of problem with a cannabis producer and his neighbor cannabis producer, and there's more tolerance for each other's pollen than a hemp producer. And it's just, since we defined hemp by its THC content, and the pollen can influence that, it's a problem on both sides, for both the hemp producer and the cannabis producer. We will need, if both are to exist, we will need very good, well-crafted regulations to do so. And you're right, 45 days, I'm not that brilliant, that I would very much struggle to come up with it. We'll be able to flesh out the issues, but again, without talking to growers, we're inventing in a vacuum, and I don't want to do that. I want to invite the grower clientele in, and we'll work on this problem. And you know what, the majority of the growers, tooth and nail, somebody gave me the advice of, well, just make an elevation cutoff, like no hemp produced, above 1,500 feet. I don't know what the lowest elevation in Trinity County. Well, there's one quick way of keeping it out of the county. My job's not here to keep it out of the county. My job's to see if we can craft an ordinance where at least a legitimate experimental place could exist. But if the majority is devoted to cannabis, and clearly the majority are cannabis producers, then I need to listen to them, and they get their chance I will probably be, John, the dissenting voice in those meetings, arguing from the side of a hemp producer, but I understand their concerns. They have a lot of time, energy, heartache, blood, sweat, and tears in the game, and they see it as being all put at risk to just let someone go produce a whole bunch of hemp, say in Hayfork Valley or something. So we're going to start, and no, I guarantee, like Keith says, I'm not going to be done in 45 days by any stretch of imagination. I mean, that's June, right? Plus, here's the other consideration. I'm only 60%, and I came here, we're trying to get cannabis people licensed and legal, and that's job number one. And I need to hold another Joe Morio to really, if I was to come up with this in 45 days, I need 3 of me. One to write the ordinance, one to do my job, and one to go get some sleep and eat.
Since you're looking at me, that's a great idea.
So wait a minute, I think Supervisor Groth
I'm
is
still trying to
fit
follow up here.
on a question.
So what is your timeline, short sentence?
Have grower meetings till we flesh out all the issues, however long that takes. So I don't really have a due date.
To follow that up, what do you need financially, and do you need to bring in extra help on this? What can the board help you do?
That's a very, very good question. I thought I was going to get asked that question.
Why don't we have him work with CAO on that?
I was just, if he doesn't know, so you don't know at this time, you'd have to talk to CAO.
I've got a bid for how much was that, Angie? About a $1,000 microscope. That's the first thing I'm going to need. People are going to be bringing me pests, and our microscope is kind of not good enough. And we plan on bringing in the money before we spend it, but I wasn't ready for that. John, just off the top of my head. I need someone very knowledgeable in pollen, and that's probably a PhD at some university somewhere. That's what I need, is some expert advice on what would a buffer look like? Oregon is 3.5 miles, Canada is 3.1 mile. There's these different buffers, when we need to talk about what buffers would look like. But here's another thing, they don't define, when they say 3.1 miles, are they talking about a tape on the ground, or are they talking about a circle on a map? We have ridge lines.
Well, this is what you're gonna investigate.
Yes, yes.
So Supervisor Groves, do you still have another question?
No.
I think Supervisor Chadwick was after you.
Yeah, so this is a really good conversation, and I understand the urgency of it right now. And it's better at this moment that we don't have a lot of people out there doing hemp, because the economy of Trinity County being as fragile as it is right now, I don't want to see anyone involved in cannabis having any type of negative. But I also would like to have that hope of having something else, if at all possible. Last July, I attended the National Association of Counties. All the United States meets once a year. It was in Tennessee. I sat and dialogued with a supervisor from Colorado. He happens to have one of the larger hemp communities in a cannabis state, and he said it was over 3 miles. So I would encourage you to contact the states as Colorado that have both, and ask them what they're doing and how they managed to navigate through that. And their hemp production, now they're not set up like Trinity County with the mountains and everything else, so you're gonna have to do a little homework on that. But I think this is a needed conversation. I'm glad that you took the time to get this ordinance before us. I'm hoping that the solution isn't a permanent ban. I would like to encourage as many viable economic pathways going forward, but not at the extent that one hurts another. So I applaud your effort, and I thank you for getting it before us. And I look forward to a solution that would bring comfort to the cannabis industry, but maybe those that are contemplating farming and the cannabis is overwhelming and they can't afford all the regulatory fees, maybe this is an opportunity for that. So I'm hoping that we can find some type of balance and tranquility, if at all possible.
It's occurring to me, how about I have a meeting and then report back to the board at the very next board meeting after the first meeting of growers to give you some feedback, give some just how big is the problem? I mean, it certainly would be a problem if we don't do anything, right? We're going to do the temporary ordinance, but the timelines kick in. So Keith, I honestly can't answer you. I don't know the size and scope of it. And without some proponents on the hemp side, which I don't even know, I know of the very few. I mean, maybe it isn't even a problem, that there is no one planning. But without any law against it or ordinance against it, someone could, and then there would be a problem.
Right. So what I want to do is, John, was that your question?
No, that wasn't my question, but I'll just
Hold. Okay, and then before I turn it over to the public, Supervisor Brown, I know this was of concern, do you have any questions at the moment?
I think they were all answered. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to the public to see if they have questions or comments on this subject. Anyone wishing to?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Rachel from Hayfork. I have some copies of a small, research paper I put together. Right now, I have people looking to go to Hayfork to manufacture CBD products. So the caveat with CBD products is that they want female hemp because that's what produces the best component. So if you allow hemp cultivation to coexist, it would be female and female plants between cannabis and hemp. So other issues you're looking at, So right now you're looking at competition for THC and CBD products. However, right now you have to get FDA approval in order to have a CBD product consumable by humans. So it's going into a completely different market. And that's an issue you're going to see come up over and over again while this is being written and considered. The cross-pollination is a very large issue, but it can be mitigated through greenhouses. It can be mitigated by having female-only plants on both sides. So that way you wouldn't contaminate each other. You're also going to look at pests, but because they're in the same genus, they're going to share the same pests. So then you're going to be looking at cultivation of cannabis versus cultivation of cannabis to hemp. The differences are going to be none, but you're going to have to look at that in terms of, are you mitigating that in your current cannabis ordinance? Would you be mitigating that in your hemp ordinance? There is research, it's not huge, but looking at those scholarly articles and using actual scientific information to create an ordinance within planning law is going to be imperative. And I do believe that both of these can work together because it could be a really big industry here. One manufacturing CBD plant could employ 30 to 50 people. So I would like you to consider doing hemp in conjunction with cannabis to create a better economy for Trinity County, which it very much needs. Okay, great, thank you. There's 7 comments.
You can give it, yeah.
Yeah, just for the record, the Colorado supervisor said that it wasn't the cannabis that was compromised, it was the hemp. The THC went up, just for the record.
Good morning. Over next to you.
Adrian Keys from Hayfork. I'm glad to see this moratorium come in. I think that the conflicts between the two crops extend beyond pollen, although pollen is a huge concern, and feminized seed is rarely 100%, especially once you get up into the kind of numbers of seeds that are run for a hemp crop. The more seeds you run, the more potential you have for those outlier hermaphroditic genes to show up. In Oregon this last year, a batch of hemp seed failed. I'll look up the findings. I talked to Joe about this earlier. It'll be in the ODA undoubtedly. Cannabis crops were pollinated by the hemp crop that were in the neighborhood of 10 miles away. And is there recourse for this? Is it a taking or a loss of some sort? You know, if I drove my car through your hemp field, I'd probably owe you for that hemp. So if their pollen escapes and attacks my cannabis crop, I would assume that there will be somewhere in the law that protects my standing. I think the agronomic conflicts go beyond pollen to both water usage and pests and pesticides. The cannabis program requires forbearance during the summer because all of our watersheds are considered impacted by cannabis. My watershed has less than 3 acres of cannabis cultivation in it and will be undoubtedly seen in the CEQA document and at the state level from the water board as an impacted watershed. So I'm not certain how another crop, commercial in that extent, could be in that same water usage zone, watershed, and not be considered an impact, seeing especially as how they're not requiring any period of forbearance. That's a little bit tricky. And in the pest and pesticide issue versus the two crops, one of the main differences is 10,000 square foot cultivation site like my own is easily maintained by a single person without the use of chemical pesticides. The plants are grown more spread apart. They're inspected daily, all of them, and pests are dealt with as they appear. If you have a field crop, essentially, lower growing, densely packed, there's not going to be room for those up-close inspections, and bug problems have a high potential of expanding beyond that farm. And then in the future, if the FDA continues the regulation the way that they have it, and it's industrial hemp and it's not a food product, the types of pesticides that will be permitted for use in there will be pesticides that you could use on ornamental plants and other industrial type crops. And the potential drift from those pesticides could then affect cannabis cultivators. So again, there are many layers of protection here. If in the future it is found that there is room for hemp in the county, I think looking at the concept of scale is very important, that we are a small, isolated county. We don't support industrial agriculture generally, geographically, water resources, so on. So if there were to be a pro-hemp ordinance in the future, it would be ideal if it could be directed in some sort of a craft-type manner. A cannabis ordinance certainly is by capping the grows the way that we have.
Very good timing.
Anyone else?
Good afternoon, Supervisors. John Brower from Junction City, and I want to applaud our Ag Department for jumping in on this. It's a very important issue. The cannabis community's talked about it for a long time. I'm aware of the issues in Southern Oregon also. I know farmers, cannabis farmers that are suing both the county and their hemp-producing neighbors 17 miles away in the Applegate Valley because their entire year's work was for naught last year. They got their entire crop and generations of breeding ruined by a big batch of industrial hemp that went hermaphrodite crazy on supposedly certified feminized seed. And I've been breeding cannabis for decades, and I can attest to even the most well-intentioned and thorough feminized breeding programs often pop with severe hermaphroditism at some point down the road within a few generations of getting feminized. I have years of anecdotal evidence of pollen blowing off the hash fields on the tops of the Reef Mountains in Morocco on a strong Scirocco wind, blowing all the way across the Atlantic and pollinating females on mountaintops in the Caribbean. It can go that far. Male cannabis pollen can stay alive as long as it stays dry. If the humidity is below about 50%, it can be very persistent and stay alive for days as it's blowing wherever it blows. If the humidity is over about 55%, then it usually gets airborne yeast attached to it, and it gets killed like that. So I also have a little bit of a problem with the crafting of this ordinance. It goes through pages of findings that mirror the findings in our cannabis ordinances. And so there are references to things like health and safety, criminal activity, that really have no place in this. And legal counsel or whoever came up with those findings, it was very misplaced. There's only, I see, one main reason why this is incompatible with current and legacy cannabis production in Trinity County. I think that's the main finding here. It is injurious to our existing cannabis industry. It both creates a competition with hemp producers not having the compliance costs that the cannabis folks do, and they're producing CBD at a very, very low cost that's in direct competition with our medical cannabis producers that have huge barriers to entry, huge compliance costs, and I encourage adoption of this ordinance today. I think it's a great idea, but I would like to add a finding that industrial hemp is injurious to our pre-existing or our legacy cannabis industry in Trinity County.
Does 15 cover it?
Can you read to me, please?
Due to the fact that industrial hemp and cannabis are virtually indistinguishable, the entry and cultivation of industrial hemp by an established, this research is prior to the adoption of reasonable regulations poses similar threats to public health, safety, and welfare of the cultivation of cannabis. Does that capture it good enough for you?
We can't have
There
this.
actually should be discussion between.
Right.
Oh, sorry.
But since you brought 15 up,
I'll sit down. I know I've taken my time, but I do encourage passage of this with that addition. I think we could get a little closer to the essence of what I was trying to communicate.
did you have something you'd like to add?
Just if you make any substantive changes to the ordinance, you have to bring it back.
That's right. So I think 15 is close to it for our purpose today. Before I completely shut the public off,
Thank you. Afternoon, Chair. Justin Hawkins from Bayport. I want to thank the Ag Commissioner and others who helped craft this. I think it is needed. We're having a hard time getting people enrolled in our commercial cannabis program here. And I see this as a way out of that avenue with less costs and regulations that we allow in production in our county. I mean, who can deny basically that industrial hemp today is not for fiber. It's for other molecules found in there. Now those same things, CBD in particular, are found in commercial cannabis production strains too. So they're simply looking for a cheaper way to get around the regulations to produce particular compounds. And that's what it is. I mean, they're not looking to make fiber here. They're not making rope. Don't talk about any of that really. And I understand the drive to isolate particular compounds, but I think we produce a higher quality product when we meld different compounds in the cannabis, especially for the medical purposes, licensing that we already have in the county. The pesticides that are going to be allowed to be used on industrial hemp actually will cross-contaminate into the water and air supply of the commercial cannabis, which is so strict. I mean, I don't think it's fair, but the rules are the rules, and there's the most incredible testing standards of all for commercial cannabis. And cross-contamination of pollen is a real thing. And it's a problem for the hemp producers because they have these laws that are artificially created. They just selected 0.3% as the threshold for whether it's legal or not. I mean, that's just kind of a made-up number, honestly. But what's not made up is when we're trying to raise the rate, the levels of these compounds in commercial cannabis, and then it gets diluted from hemp pollen. Now, that will ruin years of work because the hemp seeds are getting made every year. Gemini seeds are not 100%, no way, especially when you're throwing thousands out there in the field. And they're so densely packed, there will be hermaphrodites in there. They're not checking. And if there's a pest problem, it's got to be from the hemp fields. Cannabis farmers can't do that. We can't spray everything. You have to really keep it clean. I think that I would encourage the board to pass this as it is right now. But I look forward to having meetings where we can talk about an institute where we can work on pest problems in a contained environment. Thank you. Oh, and just before I leave, the mileage threshold in Oregon are just not sufficient here. Okay? The distance setbacks from hemp and cannabis production. One of the biggest problems is we have huge thermal drafts, especially in the afternoon. We all know going up the canyons, wind is just going forever and it's so fast. It'll go over the ridgetops and into other watersheds. And it'll carry pollen in the afternoon when it's dry and warm. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Anybody else? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. So Joe, in addition to, working with CAO, and of course, you're gonna have to loop planning into this from a land use perspective as well as you move down the road. So any other comments, questions from board members?
No, but I have a motion if you'd like to hear it.
Yep, I just want to double check. Any other questions? No? Supervisor Groves? No? All right, seeing no other questions, comments from the board.
Okay. Just one small comment. I believe Justin's absolutely correct. No one's growing. No, I know of no one that's pursuing the fiber end of this. It's a CBD crop that and his points are well taken.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Finley?
Yes, make a motion to approve the urgency ordinance as presented with the timeline that we're all aware of. And what I would like to add to that is I would like to see a budget from CAO as to how much this is going to end up costing us, and the possibility of bringing in a consultant or several consultants to look at the science and move through this hopefully as quickly as we can.
So is that two separate, or the motion
One
and
motion.
direction staff? Okay.
One motion and the rest is direction. Okay.
Well, I'd like it to happen instead of just CAO sitting out there.
Okay, so the motion would include having the CAO come back with
a budget.
Experts in budgets.
Right.
So if it doesn't pass that way, then the ordinance is going to pass
Right.
that way. Okay. So I want to make sure everyone understands.
So
The
somebody
motion
might
is-
want to make a subsequent.
I second that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second for any further discussion on the motion presented.
Can the motion be explained again?
Please. I'll explain your motion again, please, John.
Right,
Repeat it, I should say.
accept the urgency ordinance as presented. And what I want to add to it is that we get a budget of what this will entail. It doesn't need to be a lockdown budget, Just want to know what we're going to be spending on it, and the possibility of bringing in consultant or consultants for scientific data. And
Okay, so that's not actually in the ordinance. So
No,
that's
it's
why
not.
I believe it's not necessarily appropriate as one motion.
Okay.
Unless you're making passage of the ordinance contingent, but again, it's.
in my opinion, in my mind, it is contingent on getting a budget, seeing what we're going to be spending on this.
Okay, but like I said, it's not in the ordinance. You can't pass the ordinance with contingencies attached to it. So if you wanted to make a separate motion to direct staff to return with that, that would be.
I want Margaret back.
Okay, so are we, do
I have a subsequent,
Okay.
just pass it as is.
okay,
A substitute motion?
Yes.
so do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a subsequent to pass as presented. So we have to roll call.
Before I can vote on the subsequent, I still have to understand.
Well, if it's a substitute motion, then if you were to vote on that substitute motion, it would replace and take the place of his motion.
I
It's not an amendment.
understand that, but I don't know what I would be voting. I know what I'm voting on in her motion, but I still don't know what I'm voting on.
Right, so now.
County
there are
Council
two
saying
motions.
that I cannot make a motion with,
All those other bells and
with the
whistles.
two other items on it. I cannot make this ordinance contingent
Right,
on having, receiving a budget as to how much it's going to cost, or contingent on looking at consultants to help us out with this and to move forward with it. So my motion is really moot,
right,
And the
because
rule-
it's an unacceptable motion.
correct, so then,
Well, the rule of order would be that you have a substitute motion on the
So
floor,
that
which
has
is
to-
dealt with first.
right,
And if that passes, it's replaced his and his is mooted.
right,
If it doesn't pass, then you address his motion.
right,
But you're basically looking at my motion being
right.
It's not agendized essentially, because you're talking about making substitute motions to an ordinance, and that would have to come back.
All right, so
So right now you got the substitute motion on the
Do
floor.
you have a subsequent?
I have a substitute here.
I don't know if I can think that fast, no.
Well,
Me, I don't know if I can think that fast.
Okay,
So the current
Is there
motion
something
on
I
the
can help
floor
you
is
with?
that by Supervisor
No,
Chadwick.
you have
Oh.
a thought process that you want to go through, and you were told that that was an illegitimate one. Do you want to make another?
I have a substitute on the floor, so he can't,
And we are in
And-
discussion.
And we can have.
on that item.
The motion before you, which is through Supervisor
Which is-
Chadwick, to accept the ordinance as written and presented. I'm going to spend a second.
Yeah. Unless you want to make a subsequent on the subsequent,
And I'm trying to think about it.
or substitute of the subsequent. All right. I can't see you, so I don't know if you have a question forthcoming, no?
I will let you know.
Okay. So I have a motion to accept as presented by Supervisor Chadwick and Supervisor Brown. Please pull the board.
Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Supervisor Chadwick?
Aye.
Supervisor Groves?
Aye.
Supervisor Finley?
No.
Supervisor Morris?
Yes. Okay, so we'll see Joe back in 45 days or right before.
Or sooner. You don't
Before
have
that.
to wait.
Sooner?
I'd like to come back to the board after the very first meeting, I mean, you saw how the discussion
Yeah.
went. That's where we need to start, and that's why it's hard to answer any of these questions.
Oh, no,
But,
but I'm just for us to renew this.
John's discussion, it's a small little county. We spend as little money as we possibly can every time we can, right? So don't need to really be spending any money.
You know what I'm afraid of?
No, this is for CAO.
Yes, there is. Did you have another comment for CAO?
Yes, when he's done that.
Trying to keep up here.
I don't think that John's idea of having a path forward on the budget is a bad one. So, and I don't even know where this money comes from. Does this money come out of the cannabis? Well, I would think it would, because it's going to be the cannabis grower who benefits from this.
If we can do that, then we'll look at that, that revenue, the what we call revenue
But
sources.
I'm not, yeah. I mean,
This is why we have the CAO, and we'll figure it
And
out.
so I would like a report on that. At some point in the future, when you can come up with how you're gonna when there's a plan and how you're gonna fund it.
What I'm, as listening to the conversation and hoping, barring having to go hire a PhD from Davis to come up and spend time, I want to see if there's what kind of training, seminars, and that kind of stuff that's already on this topic, that the professional's already there, and we can go listen to them, and they can answer questions. But I will come up with, yes, a plan for the board.
And, yeah, there will be some sort of time frame in that plan.
So you will manage, you're gonna have to manage both departments, because if it goes far enough, it will have to go through planning and then commission.
So, but I think, just to clarify, first identify where the revenues are coming from, and then, okay.
Well, and then also, his recommendation may say we have no program. I don't know.
No, I just figured out what motion I should make.
All right, so we're moving on to our last item, B, adopt a proclamation designating the week of May 5th through 11th, 2019 as Wildfire Awareness Week. Okay, so, I lost my item. All right. Yeah, I read that, and I just was wanting to get the backup out of here.
Isn't the motion, wasn't the thing on your desk?
Not the backup, it's, it is?
It's in a folder.
Well.
But I don't.
That's, okay, there we go. Would you like to read it, Supervisor Chadwick?
Sure.
Or do you want me to?
Yes.
Oh. Since you brought the, not to force anything on you, you brought the item, so I didn't want to, I want to make sure.
Madam Chair, I'd love for you to read it.
All right. So whereas all the Trinity County's communities are at high risk for wildfire, and whereas the Trinity County Fire Safe Council was established in 1998 to work towards enhancing community awareness of the risk of fire and the importance of being prepared. And whereas the week of May 5th through 11th, 2019 has been designated as Wildfire Awareness Week with associated media and public outreach opportunities. And whereas Trinity County continues to experience catastrophic wildfires that have affected property and potentially lives with over 500,000 acres burned. And whereas it is the responsibility of every citizen of Trinity County to be prepared for the upcoming fire season. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Board of Supervisors of the County of Trinity designate the week of May 5th through 11th, 2019 as Wildfire Awareness Week, duly passed and adopted this 7th day of May, 2019 by Board of Supervisors, County of Trinity. All right. Thank you, Supervisor Chadwick, for bringing that forward. Just so the board knows, kind of it works out well that this is brought this today. We will have a fire presentation at our next board meeting from various entities that have been working on various projects throughout the county. So great timing. And with that, any other comments from the public?
Precedent.
No. All right, I'll bring it back to the board.
I would love to make the motion to accept.
Thank you. Any second?
Second it.
Just to make sure you're awake
I
down there.
was wondering. Okay. Tina, please pull the board.
Supervisor Brown?
Aye.
Supervisor Chadwick?
Aye.
Supervisor Rose?
Aye.
Supervisor Finley?
Yes.
Supervisor Moore?
Yes. Thank you. And with that, I did it right when we started the 2:30. So with that, the meeting is adjourned.
That's moving along.